Oh, cool.
Yeah, because that's kind of the problem. I got to sync all these up. But,
we got to get on now because, I mean, we've already told...
Yeah, we told some...
worth of stories.
Yeah, but that's usually how it goes. Like, I think when I had Brian on, he was like my second or third guest. Dude, I talked for like an hour and a half with him of just catching up because I've known him, ever since I was a paramedic and started, so close to 20 years. And I said we were catching up. I was like, shit, we need to start actually the podcast, which some of it was, off-camera stuff. You might not necessarily want to talk on camera, just catching up. But it was a lot of good stories. Some of the times here, I've just been like, all right, let's just start. But what were you saying about when you got your paramedic?
Well, it was just kind of a funny story. When I got my paramedic, one of the instructors that I had was a guy named Bob Stewart. He was a PA, and he had been an old volunteer firefighter in first generation when EMS first came along. Yeah. And he's a friend of mine. He was my paramedic instructor. 22 years later, I was his son's paramedic instructor.
No way.
In fact, his son Greg was chief in Stewart County for a while up in Lumpkin. I don't know if he's still there. But it was just so unique, the way that EMS works and it's in and out and all of the relationships and all of that.
Man, it is. When you messaged or emailed me about coming on, I said, Columbus. I said, I don't know if I know anybody over there. And I said, Tripp, I think, had just come on. And I said, Tripp, do you know Jim Bloodworth? And he goes, junior or senior? I said, well, senior. I didn't know there was a junior. He's like, well, I know junior better, but I know of senior.
Little blood and big blood.
Yeah. And that was the first thing. I was like, oh, I didn't know there was a junior. But yeah, Tripp knew you. And I guess the only person I know from Columbus, and you might know him, is Darren Monaco.
Monaco?
Darren. Yeah, he flies, and I guess he still works some with Columbus. Or has he gone from there? No,
he's gone from Columbus.
Okay.
It just it didn't work out trying to do all of that.
Well, I imagine not.
Yeah, sometimes you can meld and sometimes you can't.
Yeah, I knew when I first met him years ago when I worked over there one time. He said he was still doing both, and I was like, man, that's kind of a lot trying to do both.
Columbus is an odd place. It's easy for people not to know Columbus. My daddy told me something about Columbus when I was a teenager. He said that Columbus is the largest small town that you could ever want to go to. It's got 250,000 people, but it's got the attitude of like a little bitty town out in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. They don't want to have anything to do with the state. Nobody can tell them what to do. They're the smartest people in the world, and it's been that way for 100 years there. They say that the laws of God and man stop at the border of the independent state of Muskogee, and so Columbus has always kind of had to do its own thing. And so it's weird because we don't, in a lot of ways, you don't have relationships with other people in and out of Columbus. So, EMS has been one of the big things where we've developed relationships in and out. So.
But I say that's what I always heard about Columbus, all the training that y'all do of your own sort. Training house, training, like you said, I guess kind of its own independent thing. Not in a bad way, but like Columbus is very I don't want to say self-involved. That sounds kind of bad. Very self-sustaining, At least when I was, more involved on the ground.
I had an opportunity to be involved in a lot of that.
Yeah.
I'm sure later in the conversation we can talk about the story of Columbus and in fire, out of fire, back in fire, and all of that. Yeah. But in '86, we came out of the fire department. There were a lot of reasons why, and we became a third service EMS. And the fire department didn't want rescue. And so they're like, oh, hell, y'all can take rescue. We rescue cats from trees and people from burning buildings, and y'all have got all the rest of it. And this is just about the time that USAR teams were starting to get set up and formalized. Yeah. And about a year and a half into us being EMS, they created a position of training officer. And I got it for a lot of different reasons. And my boss is like, we need to go ahead and start working on this. You need to look at what a USAR team is. And this is back before the internet. You're having to look in magazines and find stuff. Yeah. But we looked at what is in a USAR team, and we started looking at the training that was available. And we were sending people all over the place for training, and it was costing like hell, Mm-hmm. And he said, okay. He said, we're going to fix it. He said, you and the assistant chief are going to get certified to teach anything and everything, and we can do it in-house. And so for about 2 years, I was on the road all the time because I got licensed through the fire academy and was teaching through the fire academy. I worked with people teaching trench rescue, high angle rescue, and the assistant chief really got on the dive side, and so he got certified to teach any and every dive class that could ever be taught. And so we got to the point that pretty much everything that we did in-house, and it saved a hell of a lot of money because instead of having to work around somebody else's schedule, we could work it around our schedule, and we're not paying anybody to come in and do the classes, and it worked out great.
Yeah.
And when fire and EMS went back together, a lot of that kind of carried back over. And so a lot of what Columbus does is in-house. It's sad that, the Fire Academy is a good resource. They don't use it that much. But on the other hand, they do a lot in-house.
Yeah.
And they had some fellow named Bloodworth came along 7 or 8 years ago in their training division and kind of brought a whole bunch of that stuff forward. It's just so freaking unreal. Again, we're going everywhere.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a quick intro for people that don't know you. Oh, yeah. This is Mr. James Bloodworth Sr., Jim, as I take it people call you. Or what'd you say, Big Blood?
Big Blood or Captain Blood?
Captain Blood. I don't know if Captain Blood would be the best moniker. If I first met you, I was like, Captain Blood. I was like, it seems like a bad moniker.
That's my email. EMS Captain Blood.
But Jim has spent a long time in EMS. I was looking at here, and you started, in 81 at Columbus?
Yeah, I started off originally as a volunteer firefighter in 78. And in 79, they wanted to get us certified up where we could get a better fire rating.
Yeah.
And so they sent us Columbus came out and did a class for us and did regular fire academy.
Yeah.
And when they were doing it, I worked second shift, and the guy that was teaching the classes, we're doing a drill field right now. On your days that you're off during the day, if you want to come participate in the drill field, you can. So I went and did their drill field and got certified as a firefighter in 79, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a firefighter. I love it. I work every third day and all of that. And so I went to Columbus, and I was like, what do I need to do to get on here? And they're like, you got any kin in the fire department? Well, no, sir. You got any kin in the police department? No, sir. You got any connection in city government? No, sir. Well, there's nothing we can do for you. And I was like, well, if I want to be a firefighter, what do I need to do? And they said, we need those EMT guys. And so if you can get your EMT certification, we might have a place for you. And this is back in the old days, back in the 70s. You couldn't just get in an EMT course.
Yeah.
There were so few EMT courses back then that you had to have a reason to be there. Your department had to send you, or the state had to send you, or something.
So it wasn't like a public course the public could attend or anything?
Yes,
kind of, sort of, but not really?
You had to have a letter. It was done through the tech school. I mean, my course was done through Columbus Tech.
Yeah.
But you had to have a justification. You had to have a letter to get you in. You couldn't just walk in and say, I want to be an EMT, because there were not that many openings, and they were trying to give them out needed. Well, it just so happened that Harris County, where I lived, was a real rural county back then. And their EMS came to our volunteer fire department and said, we want to get some of you guys trained up as EMTs so that, y'all can be first responders in the community. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. And so I went to EMT school in 1979. It was funny. We had the old AAOS, the Orange Book. Are you familiar with it?
The Orange Book.
American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, Emergency Care and Treatment of the Sick and Injured. It was one of the very first EMS texts that was ever put out. And we were taught with that. And I remember it was funny because I went my first night of school, and I'm going through there looking, wait a minute, Johnny and Roy defibrillate. Where's the defibrillator? Where's the defibrillator? And I had to learn EMTs don't do that. But so that was how I got into EMS. I wanted to be a fireman. I went to EMT school. When I got out of EMT school, I went back to the fire department and said, okay, I want to be a fireman. And I got my EMT, and they said, well, we don't have any openings. Just, come see us about once a month. And so I went to work part-time in Harris County. They needed people up there. And again, this is old days EMS. This is 1979. They had 5 full-time employees. They had a chief, and they had 4 people that basically, worked 48 on, 48 off. And then they had a bunch of us that were part-timers that would come in and work so that these people could get days off. Mm-hmm. And they are like, come on to work up here. Come up here and be familiarized. And so right after I got out of EMT school, I went up there on an afternoon, and they're like, oh, yeah, we'll get you a uniform shirt and all of that, and we'll show you the truck and tell you all about it. Okay. And then the phone rang. And I'm standing out there, and all of a sudden, they're all piling into the truck. Come on, we got a call. We got to go. Okay. So I'm in the back, and it's one of these old Southern ambulances. It's got the single rear wheelbase 454 4-barrel, goes 100 and God knows how many miles an hour. And we're driving country back roads up and over the top of Pine Mountain. I'm in the back peeping through the hole, and I'm like, oh, man, the adrenaline is going. This is it. This is it. And we pull into the city of Pine Mountain. We pull out on a baseball field, and there's a cluster of people out on the field. And as we pull in, the crowd parts, and they're doing CPR on the umpire on home plate. I'm like, oh, my God, this is EMS, and jump out. I go running over there, and the family and everybody are doing perfectly good CPR, but I'm like, I'm an EMT. I'll come in and do the CPR. And so we did compressions, and we loaded him up in the back of the truck. We didn't get anything. I did CPR all the way from there to LaGrange. When we got to LaGrange, I was so tired I couldn't hardly move, but I got bit by the bug. I mean, when the very first call that you go on is that call, I was bit by the bug, and I was like, I want to do this. And, it just kind of one thing led to another. I worked with Harris County, and about once a month I'd show up at the fire department, and I'd say, y'all got any openings? No. I was like, okay, see you next month. And they had political problems in Harris County in the 80s. The county didn't want to fund the department, and we pretty much en masse resigned. It was like, okay, y'all are going to up the funding or we're out of here. And we were out of there. And so I ended up going to work in LaGrange, and that's a whole other story in itself. I worked for...
Work in LaGrange EMS?
Work in LaGrange EMS part-time. And I worked there in February of 81. The fire department, I walked in one day, and they're like, you still got your EMT? Yes, sir, I do. Do you still have your fire certs? Yes, sir. So we don't have to train you? You can go to work tomorrow? Yes, sir. Okay, be there. And boom, and I went to work as a firefighter EMT in February of 81.
So you got your EMT first, then came firefighter?
I got my firefighter certificate.
Well, I guess full-time.
Yeah, full-time I became a firefighter EMT. I mean...
now, was that EMTB, I'm assuming, back in the day?
It was just EMT.
Oh,
we didn't have all the... At that time, we had EMT, cardiac technician, and advanced EMT. Yeah. We didn't have paramedics in Georgia back then. You were an advanced EMT. And so we were basic EMT, 160-hour class. We did IVs, we did EOAs, we didn't do D50, no drugs or anything like that. Yeah. We had fluids and all. It was pretty much a bare bones course.
Yeah, well, I imagine so.
At that time in the state of Georgia, you only had to have one licensed person on a truck to run an ambulance. You could have an EMT and a driver, and all that driver had to have was a CPR certificate. And working in Harris County, in a little bitty rural county, within 4 months of me working up there part-time, I was working shifts on a truck with a driver. Here I am, 20 years old, fresh out of EMT school in a county 40 miles from the hospital, and I'm running calls in the back as an EMT. We called ourselves ALS. Everybody up there was EMTs except for the chief.
Yeah.
And the chief was an ex-Columbus cardiac tech. And he was on 24/7. He had a Crown Vic with a drug box and everything in there. And so if you had a call anywhere in the county that was ALS, you could call him and he would meet you on the scene. Or if you were going to Columbus, you could call and Columbus would meet you at the county lines and give you a medic. But, I mean, it was rudimentary, old days EMS.
Wow. Yeah. I was looking at Mr. Jim's resume here. Cardiac tech, paramedic. You worked Columbus a long time, but you've done a ton of teaching. I saw what you had taught at Griffin, you taught at Chattahoochee, Columbus Tech, and was it Flint River? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, Flint River.
Bunch of places.
That's what I was thinking of, Chattahoochee Valley Community College. So you've done, and what, didn't you tell me too, you taught at the Gypstick at the Fire Academy for like 16 years too?
Well, I did. I was an adjunct. You know how they bring you in as adjuncts? I worked as an adjunct with some of the courses that they did over there. I got involved in the rope program when Jeff Yoder was running the yoke program. And
did you do any like the interior search and rescue or anything like that over there?
We did, because we were doing confined space.
Yeah.
They got that amazing maze over there.
Oh, yeah.
I just loved it.
I remember that. I did that probably 06, because I got my fire in 05. It might have been late 05. 05, 06, sometime in there. I remember doing the interior search and rescue in the confined space and going through that maze. And, man, that was something. That was fun. And I kind of wondered if you might have been in there, too, which I don't remember any of my instructors. It was so long ago. But the only thing I remember is I was in that maze, had a partner. And this for people that haven't done it, this is you're blacked out, but it's also a really dark building, and it's multiple. How many floors? Like 3?
Well,
which I think we only did one.
When I was over there, you had the regular 6-story building.
Yeah.
And then the 6-story building had like the add-on on the side that had the fire roof that you could work off of. But then it had tunnels underneath, and then it had like collapse layers in there where they had roof collapsed pancake that you could go through. It was just it was one of the neatest training facilities.
I remember they said something about there was like a couple floors that we could search doing that, and I think they kept us from one. They only kept us on one. But anyways, you do a 2-person team. And this floor, which you've probably seen in light, I didn't see it in light, but there's all kind of debris and stuff in there, and you're blacked out, and you have a partner, and you're simulating a search and rescue in a blacked out building. And so you're doing like a left-hand, right-hand search. Somebody's touching the wall, and you're sweeping your legs, arms out, trying to find a body or whatever you're trying to find. And so you're depending on your partner a lot. And you have to also touch the walls and feel for any windows or exits or anything, and you have to keep a hand on it. And I remember my partner, we went round and round a long time and ran out of air, and I'm like, I know he's missed the exit or something. And finally, we ran out of air. They took us off air, and finally they said, "All right, your partner missed the missed the turn off." And I think we were in there for like a half hour. They just let us keep going, and we might have passed it twice. I don't know, but it's there's all kind of stuff I remember in there. But that was pretty neat. I do know what you're talking about. I remember that. I was like, I know we've had to pass this. There's no way we should be going this long. I was getting really tired from kicking and searching because I was on the outside, or he was on the inside, or I guess he was on the outside of the wall, and I was kicking around the inside, but. Yeah.
Most of the stuff that I worked with him over there was the rope program. And back in those days, this is in like 1989, 90, 91.
Yeah.
They had a freaking amazing rope program over there.
Yeah.
Jeff Yoder was running it, but he had a whole bunch of people from Atlanta Fire Rescue that came in as adjuncts. And, these are the people that are working off the 70-story buildings. When they would come, Gypstick didn't have a 1,000-foot rope. They had 200-foot rope bags. Atlanta would come and bring their 1,000-foot rope bags because they needed it.
How much would that rope bag weigh?
It was about yay tall and about yay. It was 1-inch kern mantle. I don't know what the whole bag weighed, but it took 2 of us to carry.
Yeah, I was about to say that's got to be a lot.
A big old bag. And it was neat because some of the techniques and some of the stuff that they used to do when they would do training, the main thing they went after was window washers. They had people that get stuck as window washers, and so they were kind of really into going after the window washers. And one of the guys was telling us a tale about how he was on a line, and it was in one of the places where buildings are close together, and the wind came through, and he was about 50 stories up, and the wind picked him up off of the wall, and he's out on his line about 50 stories above Peachtree Street, looking down at Peachtree Street and waiting to slam back into the wall.
Oh my gosh.
But we in 1990, they had a guy named Arnold Larson that used to do a class called Rigging for Rescue, and it's like mountain rescue from out west.
Yeah.
And Gypstick brought that in for about 2 or 3 years there, and I did that in 90. That was the best rope class you could ever want to go to. This guy, Arnold Larson, he had the accent from the Sweden when he talked to you, and he was the rope god at the time. But we came in, and it was one of these things. We were there for 10 days. And on opening night, he met with you and he said, okay, you need to go to the store, you need to pick up food and all of that, because we're going to eat breakfast, we're going to eat supper, wherever we happen to be at lunchtime, you better have food with you because we're going to stop and break, but we're going to go to school. And it was like the very first night that we were there, we had 4 hours of classroom. Then the next day we had like 8 or 9 hours of daytime. Then you went to supper, and then you came back and you had classroom later in the evening. And they taught us, rope characteristics. They taught us how to test ropes. They taught us drop testing, all the technical stuff that went into the ropes.
Yeah.
And then we started working over there, and we would do neat things. We were doing high lines off of the fire tower over there. Then we left there, and we went to Mount Yonah, where the Rangers trained. And we did 2 days on Mount Yonah where we were doing lines and rescuing people 400 feet down off the face of Yonah and bringing them back up. Then we left Yonah, and we went to Tallulah Gorge. We went to Tallulah Gorge, and we went to where Walinda's crossing was. There's still a big steel tower there on one side where Walinda did the big crossing. We used that as a base. And we used a rocket to shoot a feeder line 1,000 feet across the gorge, and we had another team on the other side, and they basically just cut a hole in that side and used trees for anchors, and we passed lines back and forth to be able to set up lines, and we did a high line across Tallulah Gorge, 700 feet above the bottom of the gorge, 1,000-foot-long high line. And it had to be a drooping high line in order, it's a rope mechanic thing.
Yeah.
You just don't want like that. And so wherever your setup was, you have tensioning lines and all of that there, because you basically have to bring it up, you go over the edge, and then you let it droop. But we had lines to pull people back and forth, and then we did what was called an English reeve, where you put somebody out in the middle of the gorge, and then we dropped them all the way down to the bottom of the gorge. And it was funny because, you would think, okay, I'd rather be here on the bank. It's scary to be out there. That was the only time you got to take a break, is when you were on rope and you were out. Because if you were on this side, you're pulling lines and you're pulling lines and you're pulling lines. But that was a rope program they had back then. It was just totally amazing.
Yeah, wow, that's crazy. I don't think I could do that. I mean, I guess I could have really wanted to, but I guess I'd be more apt to do that than diving stuff. I know you're talking about your assistant chief that did all the diving stuff, but I'm out. I don't like I've joked before. If you ever hear about me dying in a diving accident, it wasn't an accident. Somebody murdered me.
It's kind of funny because that's one thing that I didn't. When we were doing, we wanted to be multifaceted, and I went to the dive program at Gypstick, and I can't equalize. The water pours into my nose and all of that. I can't do mask clearing, and so I failed out of that. So that was the one thing on our team that I didn't do. But we had a hell of a dive team over there in Columbus. Columbus.
Well, I imagine y'all do a lot of rescue, especially swiftwater rescue and stuff over there in town, too, I imagine.
Swiftwater is a big thing now, but before Swiftwater came, we had an odd combination because up in the north part of the town, we had a Georgia Power recreational lake. And so we had
when did they blow up the dams in Columbus and make it all that Swiftwater? Because that was during your time there probably, too, wasn't it?
Yeah. That was probably about 2012 or so when they blew up the dams.
Yeah, because there wasn't really that much Swiftwater there until they blew them up, right?
There was Swiftwater.
Yeah?
There was. Oh. It wasn't like a rope course. It was Columbus is weird because upstream you got Lake Oliver, which is a recreational.
Pull that mic a little bit, or you turn it towards you.
Which is like a recreational lake.
Yeah.
Then you had 5 miles of swift water coming down. You had 3 low-head dams coming down. And then right in downtown Columbus, the upper end of Lake Eufaula is there. So we had navigable river channel, we had whitewater and low-head dams, and then we had a big recreational lake. And we did a lot of whitewater because what would happen is people would get out below the low-head dams. That was a great fishing place. The stripers would and Georgia Power would not be generating, and so the water would be low, and everybody would get out on the rocks. Then they'd start generating, and they had sirens.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't always hear the sirens. And so you're out there in the middle of
the I'm assuming you're joking when you say that, right? They didn't hear the sirens? Because, I've been to the Albany Power Dam, and I've heard those go off, and I'm like, those things are ridiculous. Which maybe they're loud now. But,
Well, the dam's like 4 or 5 miles upriver.
Oh, okay. I got you.
The bottom Lowhead Dam didn't even belong to Georgia Power. It was an old mill dam that was built at the time of the Civil War.
Yeah.
And this is where everybody fishes. And so suddenly the water just starts coming up. And when the water starts coming up, if people are trapped out there, we could call Georgia Power and say, cut the flow, but it would be 15 minutes before the water would stop rising. And so we basically were set up to be able to run out there and get into the rocks. And it was neat because there were all kind of wild currents that were out in there. And we had a Traveler with a 40 horsepower motor on it, and we would have to work in and out and through. And we got really, really good at doing that over the years. And when they blew the dams, now it's whitewater. You know, now, in fact, that's where a lot of the rope work comes in, because the same rope work that we learned to do over at the Fire Academy, use that rope work on the whitewater.
Yeah.
You know, what do you do when you're trying to get to someplace out here and you can't power the boat and you can't anchor the boat and you've got to get it out there? You know, you run a sideways high line across the river and be able to pull boats up and down. But yeah, it's unique.
Yeah, I was about to say, I watched it was like a little mini documentary a little while back. It was about Columbus, or at least blowing the dams and all the whitewater there. And I was like, that's pretty neat. I knew they blew them, but I didn't know I guess it's not even really specific. I didn't know it to that detail about all that. It was pretty interesting, and all the what were they saying? It's the only whitewater south of Atlanta or something. I can't remember the specifics.
They say it's the largest urban whitewater course in the country. It's not true. Milwaukee has got one that runs right through downtown. There's other places, but it is unique for this part of the country.
Yeah.
When they first started talking about
that's where they did the Olympic Games whitewater rafting and stuff, didn't they? For the 96 Olympics, wasn't it in Columbus?
I
thought they did that in Columbus.
We did women's fast pitch softball.
Oh, I thought they did. I thought because I remember
it was on the Ocoee. They did it on the Ocoee. In fact, there's a course still up there.
Well, I guess 96 they didn't blow the dams yet, but I thought they did something like that in Columbus.
No, we did women's fast pitch softball.
Gotcha.
Funny tale about that. We were you involved in any of the Olympic stuff at all?
Oh, well, I mean, I grew up above Atlanta, and I remember I went to some of the baseball games, which were at Leonard Fulton County Stadium. And
I was a supervisor at the time.
I was 14.
Olympics are just, the paperwork is just unbelievable.
Oh, I imagine.
The French basically run the Olympics, and so you've got a bunch of French people, and they come in a year and a half before the Olympics, and you start having to build your books and build everything that's going to be in place, procedures and all of that good stuff. And so we had been busting butt, and finally the Olympics came, and we were caught up, and so we were just chilling. We were doing coverage, and my favorite part of the coverage is it was women's fast pitch softball. And we had one of our aid stations set up underneath the bleachers right outside of one of the dugouts.
Yeah.
And the Australian team came. And, they get out and play, and they get all hot and sweaty. And then when they're ready to start playing the regular game, they change clothes. The Australian girls never went into the locker room to change clothes. The Australian girls right there in the dugout. It was funny because all of my medics, I'd be looking around like, where are my medics? It's the Australian girls again. They would all be down there. These girls were put up in hotels in town, all the different teams, and they had buses and they had people assigned, to take them and go places and do things with them.
Yeah.
The Australian girls got the bus driver and took him out and got him drunk and drank everybody else under the table, and the cops stopped them. They're driving on the wrong side of the road. One of the Australian girls is driving, and they're driving on the Australian side of the road going back to the hotel. And they're like, okay, just go.
That's hilarious.
EMS is just amazing, the different things that you encounter in EMS.
Yeah. And now you went to medic school, was it 84, 85?
Yeah.
And so what is your medic number?
Medic's 1230.
Okay. I was saying, I knew you had to be way down, or up there, down there, whichever one is.
EMT is 10453.
Wow.
Cardiac tech is 619. Medic is 1230. I would have had a 3-digit medic number, but Columbus politics. Okay, at this time, we were still in the fire department, and we had an old traditional fire department that hated EMS. When EMS first got started, in Columbus, you had a county fire department and city fire department. They were not consolidated. And when the funds first came out, the federal funds to buy trucks and do training and all of that, the city side didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so county basically did it, and that was the origin of EMS in Columbus, was the Muskogee County Fire Department. Then in 1970, the city and the county consolidated, and the departments consolidated, but it wasn't a consolidation, it was a hostile takeover. And so the city is running all fire now. They didn't want to fool with EMS, and so there was a division within the fire department that did EMS.
Yeah.
And when I got hired on, there were some people that had no fire training whatsoever, and they just stayed on the bus. I had fire training, so probably one shift out of 4 or 5, I got to ride on the fire truck, and the rest of the time that I was on the bus. When I made cardiac tech, we were so short of ALS, I never saw a fire truck again. If I was out on the scene, I could fight fire, but I was never assigned again because they hated us. And the fire chief just hated EMS, and so basically he kicked us out of the promotional process. He said, "You're not riding on a fire truck, you can't be promoted," which basically meant you were sentenced to life of riding on the bus. Then he got us kicked out of the state fire pension.
What?
He hated EMS. He really hated us, and so he got us kicked out of the state fire pension. But during this time, this is when they started the original federal training that was done that ended up being cardiac techs was done in the early 70s. Then the state started taking over the training in the late 70s, and that was kind of when I got into it. And the state wanted to do a paramedic program. All we had in Columbus at that time were grandfathered cardiac techs. We had cardiac techs that had been through training in the past that the state of Georgia had said, okay, your local training meets the level of cardiac tech, we're going to grandfather you in. But they wanted to go ahead and do a paramedic class there. And so my group of people, they said, we're going to put you in and we're going to take you up to CT. Then when you get to CT, we're going to bring in all these other people and bring it up to paramedic. And at that time, we were paying $7,000 a year for cardiac tech, and DeKalb County was starting at $18,000 a year and begging people to come to work up there.
Yeah.
And so the fire chief said, we ain't going to do none of that paramedic training here in Columbus, Georgia, because they just go to DeKalb and leave us. So when we got to the end of the CT section, he basically just pulled the course. He said, okay, we're not going to go any further. We don't have to have paramedics here in Columbus. And the state, Region 7, wanted us to go ahead and go through with the program. And so they said, okay, that program was stopped. We're going to do another program, and the fire department's not going to pay for it. Y'all are going to have to pay for it out of pocket, but we'll do everything that we can to help you. So they set up the course, and they set up training days for the course, and we were going to get people to be able to get on the proper shifts to be able to go to class. And the fire chief found out about it, and he started moving people around to mess up the schedule. And so what the region actually did is our paramedic course, they taught 2 courses. Whatever class was taught on Monday, same class was taught on Tuesday. Then next class is taught on Wednesday, same class taught on Thursday. That way the fire chief, if he moved you off shift, you could go. And we had 4 we had 4 instructors, and these were really great people.
Yeah.
Nancy Medlock, Del Miller, Jolene Macon, and Bob Stewart. And these 4 people basically worked hard and did the class. And the chief said, you can't be a paramedic. Columbus, Georgia doesn't have paramedics. Okay, that's all well and good. My partner and I got our paramedic patches. We had uniforms with them sewed on. We had gone and taken state boards, and we're just waiting for boards to come in. And our letters came in on a Saturday. We went to our house, got our uniforms, put them on with the and it was an advanced EMT patch. You remember the stop sign? Have you seen the pictures of the old patch? Looks like a stop sign.
I don't think so. Not that I can recall, anyways.
Old medics will know what stop sign is,
yeah.
But it was just like a 6-sided patch that had the Star of Life in there, and it said Advanced EMT, and then eventually they made them paramedics. But anyway, we had that on, and we came back to the station, and next thing you know, word gets to the battalion chief, and he's like, you're out of uniform. Columbus, Georgia doesn't have paramedics. You can't wear that uniform. And chief, we're required by law. The law says we have to wear it. They called the fire chief at home on a Sunday afternoon. We ended up meeting with the city attorney, the medical director, and the fire chief.
Oh, my God.
And they told the fire chief, okay, you've got to let them wear them. Well, they can wear them, but we're not going to have any paramedics here.
That's crazy.
It was crazy. Stuff like that is why we fought out of the fire department.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine so.
It was...
It's always amazed me, too, over the years. Even not, I mean, sounds like that department, but like all departments or other departments that have been scared of losing personnel due to them like bettering themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of addressing the issues of their own department. Oh, we're going to limit you from bettering yourself because we don't want you to leave. So we're going to keep you stagnant at this instead of trying to better our own department.
Welcome.
And not necessarily just pay, but like, being a paramedic. Just being able to be a paramedic.
Welcome to Columbus, Georgia. Columbus, Georgia Public Safety has had a reputation for 50 years of doing that.
Yeah.
We train people to be police officers, firefighters, and medics, and then they go elsewhere. The city just doesn't want to put up the money. They're like, hey, okay, they don't want to work for that. We can always find somebody else. And it's crazy because in the last few years before I retired, the staffing shortage was so bad. They used to, you had to be 21 years old to go to work there, and they wanted you to have your EMT already. Now we're going to teach the EMTs there. Then 21, they weren't getting enough candidates, so they dropped the age to the point that we were recruiting people who were high school seniors. They were doing kind of like ride-alongs as high school seniors.
Yeah.
And they graduated at 18 years old. We took them into the oil field. That didn't work out real well.
So when did when I started fire department in 05, and it was probably when I went to get my medic too. I remember that someone was trying to explain to me the Columbus situation, that there was private and there was the county EMS. So it's like there's private over there, but there's also the county fire and EMS, because I guess it'd been combined about that time. You are back combined.
Yeah.
So what was the deal with that? Because I never fully understood what they were trying to say. It's like, so they run both? Are they running like different territories, or what's the deal?
Okay.
I mean, is it still like that, or is it changed?
It's still like that. Originally, there was nothing but private services there back when EMS first got started.
Yeah.
The county fire department did rescue squad, but you had private services. When the federal money came out, the city came up with an ordinance that said, okay, these privates can't be in business anymore. And so it was a pure government service. In fact, when I got hired in 81, we did convos, we did everything. There were no private services there. Then back in the mid-'80s, Rick Tibbetts out of LaGrange came in. He had Troup County EMS, and he came in and started a part-time business there. And the part-timers grew. The privates grew. And they ran ALS, but they didn't run city calls. But then the city got so short that the city started bringing them in. And so basically what we did for a number of years there, half the trucks in the city were privates. They had assigned units that were put in the fire station. They had their own quarters. They were under our dispatch. And they basically worked by our guidelines. But about half the trucks were privates. And they have moved now. We finally gotten enough medics that they're kind of moving that away. But we still have some private trucks that are based in Columbus stations.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember it was way back then. That's 20 years ago now. Somebody was trying to explain to me. I was like, so what? They got private and at the same area?
Yeah.
And I guess they were trying to tell me they're rotating them through, but I was trying to wrap my head around, because I was like, I was new to EMS, and you either had private or you had county. And I was like, they got both?
Logistically, it was difficult, but we made it work. When they worked for the city, they basically had to go by our guidelines.
Yeah.
They lived in the station. We did their dispatching. They were under us as far as anything operational. Day in, day out, staffing and all of that, that was up to the privates. But when they came in the door and they were on the truck and they were in service, they were under us. And it worked.
That's interesting. So when you went, what did you say you got cardiac tech? Was it 70?
I got cardiac tech in 83 and paramedic in 84.
Okay, so you went right back into. Now, I'm assuming, because you're 1,200, or you would have been earlier than that with your number, that had to be some of the first paramedic classes. Because when was the first paramedic class in Georgia? Was that like early 80s? I know I've heard, because there's a couple paramedics I know, well, two that are still working. One's like 72, another one's like 792. Not on the truck. They're both working ERs, which we're trying to get them on. But I know they were early on here in Albany. And I know there couldn't have been that many paramedic classes that were offered back in early 80s.
The first paramedic courses were not even officially paramedic courses or anything like that.
Yeah.
There's a really good book called The Paramedics that was put out by Jim's publication, Journal of Emergency Medical Service. It's still out there somewhere if anybody wants to look at that. All over the country, in like 40 or 50 different places around the country, post-Vietnam, different places were saying, hey, we need to improve the service that we have. The federal money was out. The federal curriculum for EMT, ambulance equipment, and all was out, but there was no standardization of ALS.
Yeah.
And all over the country, a whole bunch of different places put together their own in-house ALS training programs. Then the federal government came along about 1970, 72.
Because before that, the paramedic was like a non-standard thing. Like you got paramedics here that had these skills, and these paramedics are here that are like way different set of skills, right?
Because it was on an individual area.
Yeah.
What those docs wanted you to learn. But by 70, 72, sometime around then, they came out with the National Standard Paramedic Curriculum. And so that was the beginning of standardized paramedic training across the country. And Georgia adopted it back then, but they didn't adopt it all over. You had paramedics in Augusta, you had paramedics in Savannah, you had paramedics in Athens, you had paramedics in Atlanta, but that was about it. There were not a lot of other programs.
Yeah.
And what we had in Columbus, and this is not uncommon, this is what was all over the state, we had one of those setups where the docs had trained people, and we had kind of like an in-house training program. They taught them to defibrillate. They taught them to give basic cardiac drugs. They taught them airway management.
Yeah.
And when the state came along and set up cardiac tech and paramedic, they grandfathered these people. So probably the first official cardiac tech paramedic training in the Columbus area, I would say it's probably mid-70s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they started teaching, and again, it was done by the region and by the hospital. And back in those days, it's a very different world. Even as late as 90, because now this is a whole nother funny, different story. We can just go all kind of places and stories. I'm a field medic. I was a firefighter. I've done all of the above.
A ton of teaching, evidently.
I started teaching in '83. When I went through cardiac tech school, ACLS was not required for paramedics or anybody back then. ACLS was a course that had been put together to teach doctors and nurses that weren't in the emergency field how to handle emergencies like that. And we had a family practice residency program in Columbus, and they had new residents that were brought in every year, and they did an ACLS course for them. And my instructor in my cardiac tech class that was supposed to continue on and be a paramedic class, he was like, we need to get our guys in on this because this is what they do. And so they got permission for us to attend ACLS. Back then, you were supposed to be a doctor or an RN to go, but they got permission for us to attend. And they're like, they're not going to pass or anything like that, but it'll give them some valuable experience. We all rated IT. We were all IPs. We finished the course, and we did better than the docs. And so the region said, you know what? We're going to start putting you all to work teaching some of these classes. And so we started teaching that. Then this is the same time BTLS came out, which, for the people nowadays, that's PHTLS, IT, the original basic trauma life support. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a homegrown thing down there. It came out of Opelika, Alabama. There's a guy named Dr. Campbell who basically developed BTLS, and it went nationwide. We, in that same class group, we were one of the first groups in the country to go through BTLS. In fact, Dr. Campbell and Dr. Solt were the ones that taught our course. And we rated IP. And so now we're teaching. And the training director, Nancy Medlock, in our region, she told me, she's like, you teach well, you do well, you need to go to EMT instructor school. And I was like, okay. So I went to EMT instructor school in '85. And I started teaching, and I was I was an adjunct. I was an adjunct for like 4 or 5 different courses.
Now, did the state have did they have their state instructor licenses back then, or is this like national? Okay,
yeah. In fact, the course that I went through as an EMT instructor was the first one that was taught to the national standard in '85. That was the year that they came out with the national new standards for EMT instructors. And we were actually a course before a course. We didn't have a course number. And down the road, that messed me up too because we didn't have a course number, but that's a whole nother story. But I started teaching EMTs then, and I liked it. I liked teaching. I was a medic, but I had recognized, by this time, by the mid to late 80s, I'm a full-time paramedic. I'm working on a very, very busy, kick-ass urban service. I mean, we're running 18, 20 calls a shift, and I realized I can't do this the rest of my life. I don't want to be 50 years old and getting up in the middle of the night and doing all of this stuff. Where do I want to go with this? And I was like, teaching is going to be good. And so I was already working as an EMT instructor, and I ended up getting my own courses. The instructor that they had at the tech school quit, and so I started teaching. I was still working full-time for the city, but I was EMT instructor for the tech school. And I like that. I was like, man, I want to do all these instructional courses. I want to get into all of this. So I got certified in everything that I could teach in. I was teaching for Gypstick. I was teaching for the state, you name it.
Yeah.
And my department created a training officer position in 1989. And, I mean, I wrote specs for the position. We were a growing department. We had just come out of the fire department.
Yeah.
And I stepped into it. And I'm building an in-service training program for the department because we didn't have one before, and I'm really occupied doing that. But somebody suggested, you ought to take the paramedic instructor test. I was like, why? Well, you just ought to. And so they had a paramedic instructor program back at that time, and I took it, and I was one of the first pure paramedics that went through that. Back in those days, paramedic instructors were nurses, PAs, the whole 9 yards. Mm-hmm. But I took the program, or I took the thing, and here's another funny story, and it involves people that you know. At the end of the program, it was like a week-long program, and at the end of the program, to get our license, we had to pass a test. We took the National Registry, which wasn't standard back then in the state of Georgia, but we took National Registry. Then we did the full practical for National Registry, and then the very last thing that you had to do to get certified is you went before a board of experienced instructors. And I went before a board of Trish Hotz, Barbara Tucker, and Bill Harris. Bill Harris taught the Gwinnett program.
Yeah.
And Bill Harris didn't feel like medics needed to be in there. He felt like he needed to be a professional educator. Trish and Barbara, I had been teaching in their BTLS and ACLS courses for years. We were friends. We all got along together. And so I sit down, and the three of them are sitting over there, and I'm sitting on this side of the table, and they've got some papers in front of them. And Bill Harris says, pick your poison. Whatever subject you pick, you need to tell us all about that. Okay. My poison was diabetes mellitus. Okay. I went into, this is what diabetes mellitus is. This is how it affects the body. This is the pathophysiology. This is all of the treatment and all of that. And Bill, who hates me and didn't want me to pass, is sitting back, and he's like, Mr. Bloodworth, I don't think you understand the depth that is required for this. Tell me about the Krebs cycle. I had just finished a semester of biology at college. Oh, you want to know about the Krebs cycle? I'll tell you all. And Barbara and Trish are just busting a gut. They still remember that today. They are just busting a gut. And so I got certified. So here I am. This is in November of 1989. Now I've got another piece of paper on my wall that says paramedic instructor. Well, in January, we had a problem with the tech school because the tech school wanted to set up a full-time paramedic program, but the nursing director up there wanted one of her instructors to teach it. And because they wouldn't let just an RN teach it, they stopped running paramedic programs, and we had a shortage. And so I get called into my boss's office in January of 90, and he's like, Lieutenant, you have passed your paramedic instructor course. Yes, sir. So you can teach paramedics. Yes, sir. I want you to put together a paramedic program that will start in February and finish in time for the December boards because we need paramedics. Any questions? This is 1990. We didn't have computers back then. This is before the day of computers and discs. There was no standardized training material. To be a paramedic, you had the national standard curriculum, and that was it. Everybody had to develop their own paramedic program. There was no standardized teaching material whatsoever out there. And I'm like, oh, my God. So Barbara, Trish, I called up.
So is this training them from nothing to paramedic?
This is taking them. This is
from EMT to medic?
EMT to paramedic.
Okay.
But I called all of them up. Trish, Barbara, Sam Stone was up in Gainesville. I called all my friends that I taught with, and I was like, help! And so they all work with me. And, you know, when you do a paramedic program, there's an amazing amount of stuff that has to be done. You know, you have to have the complete curriculum laid out in detail. You have to have a class schedule laid out in detail. You have to have your insurance all lined up. You have to have your contracts with all of your clinical facilities. You have to have all of your assistant instructors, their CVs. All of this stuff has got to be put together, and I had a month to put this together. Put it all together. Thank you, Trish. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Sam. Y'all saved my lives. But and we had the old Nancy Caroline book. Are you old enough to know the Caroline book?
I don't think so.
Okay, that was the first really good paramedic book that came along. Was the Nancy Caroline paramedic book. And I started off with a class. I had 12 people that came in the door at EMT. And then when we got to CT, I had 3 more that were CT that came in. Everybody passed on CT. Everybody passed on paramedic at state boards. I was just tickled shitless because this was the first class that had ever been done in the region where you had a 100% pass rate on that. And no, I was tickled.
I can only imagine.
I was really tickled. But I actually ran the paramedic program down there because of the difficulty with the school.
Yeah.
We needed the paramedic program, and the nursing department did not want to fool with us. But we wanted to have it certified through the tech school. So I actually taught the program under continuing ed. It was a co-sponsored program by Columbus EMS and Columbus Tech, and it was done under continuing ed. And at the end of the program, you got a certificate of completion because we couldn't do the degree program.
Yeah.
But what I did is I took my program and I went across the river to Chattahoochee Valley Community College in Phoenix City, and they had a paramedic program. And I met with their dean and said, okay, here is your paramedic degree program. Here is my program. It's an exact match. I'm covering everything that needs to be covered. What do we need to do to get y'all to accept this? And they basically said that our people, all they had to do was come over there and take the Englishes, the maths. They had to take a total of like 40 hours. This is back, we didn't do semesters, we did quarter hours. But they had to do 40 hours at the college, and they would recognize my program into their degree program. So basically, I was teaching a program where they could, do the class through Columbus Tech, Columbus EMS, and walk out the door with an associate degree in paramedic.
Wow. Yeah, I'm probably one of the few ones now, and I gotta imagine it changed not long after I got my medic in 2008. That I'm probably one of the few that still don't have an associate. Mine's just a certificate. I have a paramedic certificate.
Yeah.
And I know shortly after that they changed it, in which I know I could go back. I've looked into it. It's like 12 hours or something I need. It's like an English about something. I don't know. It's whatever class I need to get my associates. It's like 12 or 16 hours, something like that. And I need to do it. But it's kind of one of those things like, is it really going to do anything for right now? No. Do I need to get it? Yeah. You know what I mean? I keep putting it off because it's like, do I really need it? No. But whenever I've changed jobs or something, everything's like associates. They want the associates now of EMS or paramedicine, whatever they've got it labeled as. And luckily, most of the stuff I'm grandfathered in because I still have a certificate. But yeah, I don't have a degree. I have a certificate.
We required it for promotion. Back in the early 90s, the city government over there did a look at public safety and salaries and all of that. And they said, okay, we're going to come up with some competitive salaries, but in turn, you've got to meet these particular requirements. And one of the things that our people had to do is you had to have the associate degree to be able to move up.
Yeah.
And so it was important for us to be able to have the associate degree there. And I said tech school wasn't offering it, and so we did it through the college across the river, and it worked out well.
Man, there's something I was going to ask you about. I was looking through the stuff you sent me, and I was like, that is interesting. I don't know if it's that interesting to anybody else, but where was it? I circled it because I was like, I want to ask him about this. And, oh, man. I know I circled it. Oh, yeah. I saw, like, at the Columbus Tech, I know you put a thing there about, like, negotiating malpractice insurance contracts for students and instructional staff. You got to tell me more about that, because I was like, that's involved with paramedic? Like, that seems mildly interesting to me. I was like, I have not heard of a paramedic doing that.
Because I don't do paramedic anymore, I don't know what they do now. But my son became a paramedic instructor, and they were having to do that. The state of Georgia, in order for you to have a paramedic program, you got a package that you've got to submit to the state of Georgia. And one of the things that's in there is you've got to have malpractice insurance. And so basically again, when I started doing this, it was back in the days before internet. I was calling insurance companies and getting with them and setting up, and then getting with hospitals to find out what the hospitals were going to require in the way of malpractice. And so I had to negotiate these and then come up, because I had to have that as part of my package to be able to do the clinicals. It was part of a paramedic course back then.
That's just interesting to me, because that's the aspect of setting up a course or something like that I never would have thought about. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, completely makes sense. But I was like, I've never thought about that.
I didn't know about any of that. So, I had to go into all the facilities, my clinical facilities, and talk to them, because we had to have a clinical contract for every facility that we went into. And we were like 4 different hospitals that we were doing clinicals in. And then some of the hospitals, you couldn't just go into the hospital, you had to go into the department. And so, I had to go to surgery for the anesthesiology for tubing, neonate, cardiac, all these different departments. And we had to go in and meet their requirements, and all of that had to be put together in the course and in the course package.
Wow. I mean, it only makes sense, but it's stuff you never think about, probably unless you're in the weeds on that stuff trying to set it up.
And it's funny because, again, just bouncing all over the place here, I wanted to be an instructor. I wanted to get out of the field. And my thought was, I want to run a tech school paramedic program. I want to be a full-time. I want to be a Barbara Tucker. I want to be a Trish Hotz. That's going to be my full-time job. And that was kind of what my goal was. But Columbus Tech, for politics, they just did not want to put a paramedic in that program. So I'm working in Columbus, and I'm going ahead and doing my own thing full-time in Columbus. I'm the training officer. I've gotten all of the incentive promotions that I can. And in 1996, we revamped our department, and we had never had a shift supervisor before. And we created a captain shift supervisor position. Well, at the same time, Columbus Tech finally decided, okay, we're going to hire a full-time instructor. And so they said, okay, your job's open now. I was like, yeah, okay. What are you going to pay me? They were going to pay $36,000 a year. I was making $42 as an EMS lieutenant, and if I promoted to captain, I'd be making $48. And I'm like, I can't work for you like this. And tech schools can supplement for instructors if they want to keep instructors. At the time that I was working there, their cosmetology instructor had no degree, and she was making $50,000 a year. And I talked to the tech.
It's funny, but not funny.
I talked to the tech school, and I was like, you're going to have to supplement, if you want. And they were just so convinced that I was going to have that job that they didn't interview anybody else. They didn't do anything else. They were already advertising the course because they just knew I was coming. And I didn't come. I went in and put in for promotion and got the supervisor slot in Columbus. And then I still had to put the Columbus Tech official program together because we needed it. And my boss says, okay, they messed up. They didn't hire anybody. They're going to have to hire somebody, but you need to go in there and put the program together because they've got a start date. And so I had to go put their program together, and I did that. And then I don't know if you saw the thing about Flint River in there. A friend of mine, Larry Lambert, was the lead instructor at Flint River, and they were going to set up a degree program over there. And they hired Larry to come in and set up the degree program. He had personal problems. His wife got killed in a car wreck. All kind of stuff went on. It got to be the start of the program, and he had nothing. He was like, I can't teach, and he had done nothing. And so they called me up, and they wanted me to come take over the program. And, I was in the same boat that I'd been with Columbus. I was like, look, I'm making a lot of bucks over here as a supervisor. I like what I'm doing. I can't come in. And they're like, we need a paramedic program. What will it take to get you to come in here and run the program develop the program, run it for a quarter, and then we can hire another instructor? And this is back in 1996. I was like, you can pay me $20 an hour, and you can pay me 2 hours travel time each day, and you can give me an additional 8 hours a week administrative time. And they're like, okay. I didn't think they were going to do it, and they did it because they had to have a slot filled.
Yeah.
And so I went to Flint River and did the same thing, put the whole program together, and I taught the first quarter over there until they could hire a full-time instructor and bring the instructor in.
That's crazy because I saw in there it looked like you did several places, Columbus Tech, and what was it, Griffin?
Griffin, I was, there's a lady named Ann Austin who's one of my dearest friends in the world, and she and I, very parallel careers. She was a firefighter paramedic at DeKalb when I was a firefighter paramedic at Columbus. We were EMT instructors. We taught back and forth in the teacher mafia of that's what we had in the 1990s. We had an instructional mafia in the state of Georgia. I mean, we all knew each other.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of y'all.
Well, and there weren't a lot of us, and we worked to help each other.
Yeah.
Like somebody's doing a BTLS course, okay? Instead of having to hire all kind of other people, they say, can you come do this class? Yeah, I can come do this class. I can do it on the clock from Columbus. All you got to do is just, give me a per diem to eat on and a place to stay.
Yeah.
But in return, when I do a BTLS program, you do that for me. And so there was like an EMS instructional mafia that was going on back then. In fact, they always used to laugh at us because Jekyll Island was the big EMS conference back then. And it was a very formal, 4 or 5 day program and all. We all had a spot by the pool. We got down there and we put our coolers out by the pool at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we stayed at the pool drinking all day long. And my boss used to give me hell. He's like, we're paying for you to go down there. And I was like, Chief, if I go to classes, how many times can I learn about differential diagnosis of EKG? Okay? The class does no benefits. But I'm sitting out there drinking beer with these people, and the whole time that we're drinking beer, hey, we're trying a new program at our school. We're trying to do this. We've got this new piece of equipment that we're using. Hey, I've got a class. We're networking.
Yeah.
And we got most of the networking for the whole year done sitting there at Jekyll Island because, it's all of us. That was the one time that all of us would be together like that. But, my friend Ann, she was the lead instructor at Griffin. And Griffin at that time, she was training officer for Upson EMS. But she was also running their EMT program at Griffin Tech. And that was at the time that all of the South Atlanta counties were requiring EMT to get on the fire departments. So there was a big demand for EMT courses, and all the tech schools were. And so she was doing 2 classes at a time. Constantly, she would have like a Monday, Wednesday, and a Tuesday, Thursday class. And for a number of years, I was working pretty much. I would either do a Monday, Wednesday, or a Tuesday, Thursday, and I would do the class up there. And then when they decided to go to paramedic, it was kind of the same boat that Upson was in. Ann hadn't gotten her paramedic instructor certificate, and they needed a licensed instructor to put together their program. So they put me on paper as the lead instructor, and I put the program together and was carried as a lead instructor until she could get her instructor certification.
So, are you still instructing now? I know you said you retired, 2023?
Yeah, I got out of instructing when we came back into the fire department. In Columbus Fire and EMS and fire separated, and we had a good thing going.
Yeah.
We based our trucks in the fire stations. The fire department did first responding. We worked really, really well together. But the city was not paying paramedic overtime.
So, let me come back to something you said at the beginning. So you said y'all were doing the rescue. So did y'all have rescue trucks too with EMS?
Yeah.
So fire, if they had rescue,
fire rescued cats from trees and people from burning buildings. Now, I say that sarcastically because we taught them.
So y'all were handling like the extrication and
stuff?
Nice.
Yes. We taught them to work with us. When we were Columbus EMS, we handled extrication. And the way that we did it is that we were running 9 trucks. 3 of our trucks had a supervisor on there, and these are ambulances that carried a full set of AMCUS equipment. I mean, AMCUS is the best in the world. But we had the full AMCUS. We had ropes. We had all kind of stuff like that. Every truck in the city had basic rope stuff and basic rescue tools.
Yeah.
When you came to work as part of your employee training, we taught you rescue. When you came in the door, we taught you to do rescue support. Okay, everybody in the department could car cut. We did intensive car cutting, so any EMT in the department could do car cutting. Rope work, we taught them basic rope work. Like if you pull up on a scene and you've got somebody down an embankment, they had the bags on the truck to be able to throw a quick line down, rappel down, stabilize the patient. And then they were taught to support when the rope team got there. They could tie knots, they could tie anchors. Same thing with water. When you went out on a water job, we had our regular dive team and boat team, but everybody in the department knew how to drive a boat. Everybody in the department knew how to handle a dive line and a search line and all of that. And so we did all of that good stuff.
So is this all stuff that y'all just taught in-house, or do they get certs? Like, I guess I'm trying to, because, typically all that's for, like, fire department stuff, so, like, you'll fire to fire, you take a class, you get a cert, like, water rescue or whatever.
This goes back to about 1990. We set up our USAR program back then, and it was costing too much money to do the outside training, and so we all got certified. I got certified to teach confined space rescue, high-angle rescue, vehicle, mechanical extrication, surface. We had certifications and all of that. Hazmat, we were all, basically.
So were these like MPQs, or was the MPQ even around then?
MPQ wasn't around back then.
I was about to say, I didn't think it was.
It wasn't around back then. Whatever certification that we could find where we had an official certification, we got it to basically cover us. And
that's got to be a fairly unique situation, a department to do all that.
It was, and it was kind of neat because
I can't imagine there's too many people you could collaborate with like that was y'all's specific situation.
And I'm getting to that right there.
Sorry, go ahead.
When we first were starting to develop this stuff, we had to farm out for courses. And so for high-angle rescue, the Fire Academy at that time didn't want to certify us in high-angle rescue because we were EMS. And so I went to a place in South Carolina called South Carolina Emergency Rescue College. It was up in Greenville. And they did a lot of this training. And so I'm up there for a week for a class, and I've got time to kill. And so I'm going to see what's going on in the way of EMS up there. So I went to an EMS station up in Greenville. Hey, I'm training Officer Columbus, and we're doing a training exercise tonight. Do you want to participate? And Greenville County EMS did rescue, same way that we ended up doing. They did rescue up there. And they did high angle. The very first night that I went up there, their training officers running an exercise, and I rode along with them. They've got cliffs up there. They've got on the Blue Ridge up there, they've got 100, 200, 300-foot cliffs that people climb on and get stuck on. And I went up there, and they're doing a nighttime cliff rescue training exercise. And I was like, this is cool. And we got to talking to them, and they had vast resources. They already had all of this stuff in place, and they helped us to be able to do this. And we used to co-train with them because they had more resources than we did in order to be able to train. They had a big old SAC base up there that got repurposed. The airlines used it to refurb aircraft, and so you had hangars that had girders 200 feet up in the air that you could work and do rope work out of. It had like a vast drainage system underneath that you could do confined space up under. And so we worked with these people, and they were a great help in bringing us up. But it was like when we came back in the fire department, and again, there's just all these different lines of back and forth.
So when did y'all go back into the fire department? When did y'all back here combined?
2001.
Yeah.
2001. The medics sued the city because they weren't paying overtime. You know, the anytime anything 42 and above, you got to pay medics overtime for. Firefighters don't have to get paid overtime for anything over 56.
Yeah.
The city of Columbus says, okay, well, the laws of God and man stop here. Even though you're EMTs, we're going to pay you on the firefighter thing. We're only going to pay you for anything over 53. And so our guys sued. I mean, people all over the country had sued. Lawsuits had been settled. It was established law, but Columbus was just behind, and they refused to go along. And so they fought it. And so we had a 5-year court battle for the EMTs trying to get their overtime. And in the end, the court says, okay, Columbus, you need to give them their overtime. You need to pay them 2.5 times what you owe them for the 5 years this suit has been going on as punitive, and you've got to pay in the future. And the city council was pissed off because they had to do this, and they said, screw it, we'll put it back in the damn fire department. And so it was like, boom, there was no plans, it was just suddenly, okay, July 1, you're in the fire department. I mean, we're like, what do we do? And it was a very, very unique situation for a couple of years.
It sounds like chaos.
It was. It really was, because, okay, here I am. All right, I'm an EMS shift supervisor. At this time, we were running...
At that time, you've been doing... EMS have been separate for how many years?
Since 86 to 2001, 15 years. And I'm supervisor. I've got 9 ambulances, 3 of which are rescue ambulances. I've got a heavy rescue truck. I've got a paramedic first responder unit. I've got boats. I've got all of this stuff that I'm running. And we're in the fire department, and they're like, okay, but you're not a fireman, so you can't be a supervisor, but you still got to do all of this. And they put me under the battalion chiefs. Well, the battalion chiefs and I, when we were separate departments, we were friends. I mean, basically, we worked together because the 2 departments worked together.
Yeah.
And so, I'm told, okay, you're under Chief Johnson. Mike, am I under? And he's like, just do what you got to do. Just, And, I mean, it was kind of funny because for about 2 years, we almost existed as 2 separate departments. We were in, but we were not.
Yeah.
And then they got a new fire chief in, and the new fire chief says, okay, all of that goes away. And rescue just kind of totally went away. And then they had some bad rescue calls where they couldn't handle it. And so here I was now. They didn't know what to do with me. The first 2 years that we were in the fire department, the EMS supervisors continued to be EMS captain supervisor in the fire department, but we had to coordinate through the battalion chiefs. Then they eliminated that, and they took the 3 of us, and I became the rescue captain. Another guy became the logistics captain. Another guy became the supply captain. And so for 2 years, I was the EMS rescue captain, and I had to redevelop the same rescue program that we had developed in-house before. I had to redevelop and take firemen and bring firemen up to speed on all of this stuff. And it was a very backwards situation.
Man. So when you first said that, like they did away with rescue, I was like, they did away with it, but I guess it sounds like they're just trying to reintegrate it, or I guess using you.
They pretty much were not going to do anything. I mean, they're like, we're not going to fool with this. We couldn't do any rescue training. The equipment was there. The people that were certified were there and all of that, but they weren't going to approve any time to do rescue training. They didn't buy any new equipment from...
they didn't see that as being worthwhile in Columbus with all the... I mean, obviously there's car wrecks and you're going to have to extricate people.
They did. They did.
I mean, you imagine there's got to be even like, to a greater degree, like, I mean, there's got to be a lot of trains and heavy equipment that go through Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, if you don't want to get into even like the water rescue stuff, I mean, Columbus has got a lot of good
You have been
environment.
in the business for a number of years.
Yeah.
You know how fire departments can be.
Yeah.
Okay, you got some fire departments and fire chiefs that are jam up.
Oh, yeah.
You've got some that are dinosaurs. We had a dinosaur cadre. There was a bunch of people that actually got pissed off in '86 when we broke away from the fire department because we got more money. When we broke away, we got pay raises, we got all kind of neat stuff, and all these firemen are pissed off. Well, in 2001, the firemen that were pissed off in '86 are now the battalion chiefs and the captains and the deputy chiefs. And so it was kind of almost like, we've got you back. We've been waiting for you.
You know, and I think I said it before we started recording when we were just briefly talking a little bit. It's always bugged me when you've had departments, whether it be fire or EMS, or really probably all matter of public safety, to be honest, that don't want to train anybody any better because they're scared of them leaving to another department that's more proactive, doing more. Well, we're just not going to give them that level of training. We don't want them to get better to serve our citizens because we don't want them to leave. So they don't want to work on themselves or their own department. They just want to be lazy and prohibit you from getting better to serve because they don't want you to leave, like to hold you back. And that has always bugged me. So why aren't we doing this? Well, there's too many people leaving going over here. Well, maybe you should look at the mirror and maybe you should try to make this better over here so they don't want to leave and give them more opportunity. But no, that's too much. And I get you're confined by budget and stuff to whatever degree.
But the attitude.
Yeah, it's the attitude that kills me of that.
And it still goes on because this, I mean.
Oh, I mean, I know it hadn't changed. I mean.
This is something that's really funny. I showed you the picture of my oldest son and all. Didn't want any of my kids to go into public safety. I wanted them to get real jobs. Both of my daughters graduated, got degrees. Their husbands got degrees. They've never had to work. My son didn't know what he wanted to do when he graduated. Back then, you had to be 21 to be a fireman. And so he bummed around. He worked, but he did a whole bunch of odd jobs.
Yeah.
He just really didn't have any direction. He turned 21, and he was like, Dad, they're doing the PT testing for the fire department. And I'm like, oh, well, you might as well. But the thing is, he had grown up in it. When I was doing all of this teaching, when I was going all over the state teaching for the fire academy, teaching all these different programs, he grew up going with me. When he was 15 years old, when I did auto extrication classes, he was teaching heavy hydraulics when he was 15 years old. I mean, he couldn't help being around this stuff. And so I was like, fine. And it was funny because when they did the testing, he had a ponytail then. And, I'm there at the test, and the chief that's over the test, he and I are standing together, and he calls my son over, and he's like, Bloodworth, you get on the fire department, that ponytail's mine. Without batting an eye, my son whips his knife out, puts the knife in the chief's hand, and says, Chief, you hire me? You can have it right now. But he got on board, and we have had the most remarkably similar careers. He got into all of the rescue. He got into the teaching. In fact, he just got through doing 7 years in the training division in the fire department. He is paramedic instructor. He did all of that good stuff, and he's finally gone back to the field. He got his captain a couple of months ago, and he's got a big station that he's in charge of now. But what you were talking about them not wanting to do the training, a whole bunch of the stuff that he got, the fire department didn't want to send people off to do, and so he basically did it on his own, he and some other people. He's a SWAT medic now. He wanted to be a SWAT medic, and we don't do SWAT medic training here. So he went on his own. He got with Philip and the folks. That's why I met you, was talking about Philip and all. He got with them and started working with them, and they in turn turned him on to GSP. And he started working with GSP, and he's been a SWAT medic with GSP for about 5 years.
Oh, wow.
For the people out there in the world that don't know it, I'd never heard of the GSP SWAT team, but it's the baddest SWAT team in the state of Georgia.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't publicize. It's quiet.
Yeah.
But whenever you have any county that doesn't have a SWAT team, who you going to call? Whenever you have a city or a county that's got a SWAT team, but they have officer-involved shootings and stuff like that where they don't really want to put their guys in, GSP. Whenever you have anything big like the Stone Mountain protests, anything like that that's going on, they call GSP. And
so do they have like different teams throughout the state? I'm assuming like GSP?
They do.
Like different regions?
GSP has got regions set up, and each region has got, equipment and a team and a commander and all of that. Then over at Forsyth, they've got people that are on duty 24/7. They've got one team of like 4 or 5 people that are on duty 24/7 at Gypstick. They got a helicopter sitting there, and they're ready to go anywhere in the state of Georgia. The other ones in the region, the officers that are on the SWAT team have got their gear in their car, and so a call comes in, and they might go to their region or they might get called to another region. My son, because he's not with Georgia State Patrol, he gets called, and they'll tell him, okay, be at such and such point and the helicopter will pick you up, or be at such and such point and an officer will pick you up. And so he goes and he deploys with them. And he's fully integrated into the team. He's licensed. He's got his mandate training and all of that. And Columbus finally decided, okay, maybe we need to do that. And so he's gotten the training there. So along with being a paramedic instructor, along with being a captain in charge of the fire station, along with being a rescue instructor, he's also mandated. He's on the Georgia State Patrol SWAT team. He's on Columbus' SWAT team. And in order to be on the Columbus SWAT team, he is also a licensed police officer with the Columbus Police Department. I'm proud of my boy. But I mean, it was,
I would be too.
It was just so remarkable that we had the parallel, and that I got to work with him. Marion County, we both worked as paramedics in Marion County part-time. We're working together on the truck one day, and there's a guy that's having chest pains, and we're out evaluating him, and we get lines going on, and we've given him aspirin, we've given him nitroglycerin, and I looked over at Jimmy, and I was like, you wheeling or healing? And the guy says, what are y'all talking about? Well, we're trying to decide who's going to drive. He said, if I'm sick, I want the most qualified person in the back with me. And my son looked at him and said, sir, you have a choice. You can have paramedic James Bloodworth in the back, or you can have paramedic James Bloodworth in the back. And the guy looks at our shirt and our name tags. He just starts laughing. He's like,
Well, it's always, I've very much been a person that I've always just been at the right place at the right time as a medic. Like, I didn't get into this business for any, altruistic, benevolent reasons. Like I've said before, I saw I only had to work 10 days a month. Shoot, that's right up my alley as a slacker. I can do a lot of outdoor stuff. I can do a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing. Then I got into some golf. But I've just always been at the right place at the right time. And I think I discovered with EMS that it was something I was pretty good at, and I enjoyed it. I had no intentions of ever, I loved fire department, and I still do. But I wound up loving EMS, and that was something I didn't think I was going to like. I liked the structure, and you're going back to
you got bit by the bug.
Yeah. And you talk about like your son at 21 and work different odd jobs and stuff. And I said it before on here, I'll see different like young men. It would be young women too, but mainly it's young men that I bump into that have kind of bumped around, different stuff. I'm like, why don't you join fire department? Just give it a whirl, because if nothing else, it's going to give you some kind of discipline. It's not necessarily military, but there's a lot of paramilitary into it. There's some departments I know. Like I rep, America's Fire a lot because I came through there, and I know a lot of the people there still. And but there's several good departments, train your own, like Albany. I had Ricky on here, and train your own, and it's a good thing for you. If you ain't got nothing else going, what's the worst it can do? And I think that's a good thing for young men or women that don't necessarily have any direction, trying to figure out what to do. Hey, at least it'll give you some discipline, it'll give you some structure, and especially proactive to fire departments. You can gain a lot of skills and go a lot of different directions. And people like yourself and like your son, it sounds like, that have done a lot and took advantage of that. I completely respect. Because I was never one of those people. Anything I kind of did, I don't want to say I was forced into, but I kind of fell into it. I was like, okay, sure, I'll do it. I'll try it. And like the proactiveness of y'all, wanting to do all these different classes, get an instructor and teach, I completely applaud y'all. I've never been that. I can teach some stuff, but I am not the greatest teacher. There's certain things like I'm pretty decent at, I could teach you about, but it's like, I don't have, there's something about people, I'm assuming like yourself, I just met you. that are just able to teach, and like Brian I had on here, he's been an instructor for a long time. That man could teach anything to anybody, I swear. And just the way you can break it down and get on people's level, like that's not a skill like I greatly possess. I don't think.
Watching the one that you did with him on there.
Yeah.
It's like he sounds like,
Oh, supremely intelligent. He could have been a physician, or anything he wanted to do. And it's, I'm sure like yourself, like just the intelligence, the way to relate to people and break stuff down, that's like it's just a skill. I'm sure you can better anything, but some people just have it, I feel like, in spades of that ability.
Well, you've got the ability, but you've also got to be willing and motivated.
Yeah.
One of the things that I used to teach people, when I teach a class, you have cookbook medicine. Mm-hmm. There is so much cookbook medicine being taught today. You've got packaged curriculum, and you're teaching the packaged curriculum. Mm-hmm. I used to get fussed at because I taught too much. I went above and beyond the curriculum.
Well, look, I came through Trish. So, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
A force of nature.
Oh, yeah. Look, I'm trying to get her on here, and I might get you to help me get her on here.
Oh, you tell her I said she better get her butt on here. She needs to be here.
Yeah, she's one of the OGs.
But one of the things that I looked at is, here's your curriculum. A lot of people say, okay, that is teach the curriculum and that's it. You don't have to teach anymore. Mm-hmm. And they looked at the curriculum as a ceiling. I always looked at the curriculum as a basement.
Yeah.
If you teach 1 iota less, you haven't taught the class. It's a basement and you build up from there.
Yeah.
So many people look at it and they're like, oh, that's the curriculum. We don't need to teach anything more because that's the curriculum. I always had when I taught mine, again, instead of cookbook medicine, what I used to tell my people is I said, this is the way my class is going to work.
Pull that a little closer. I say pull your mic just a little bit closer.
Right. I said, I'm gonna teach you anatomy and physiology.
Yeah.
This is how it's put together, and this is how it works. Then I'm going to teach you pathophysiology. This is what goes wrong. If you know anatomy, how it's put together, if you know pathophysiology, what goes wrong, then treatment is easy. Instead of trying to memorize all kinds of different things, it's like an auto mechanic, okay? Take an old-fashioned auto mechanic. An auto mechanic has to know how a motor works. He has to know how the carburetor works. Mm-hmm. He has to know how the ignition system works. If he's dealing with a car, he can't do cookbook medicine. He's got to look at the whole car. He's got to know how the motor works in order to know what's going wrong, in order to know what to fix. Mm-hmm. And the human body is no different. If you're going to be a good medic, if you're going to be a good doctor, that's the way they teach DOs. MDs are a whole different world, but DOs are taught that way. They're taught the holistic medicine, and that's the way that I always try to teach my people.
Well, I think you have to, just like you said, you got to understand what's going on completely to be able to treat somebody. And like that, like Trish, yourself, it sounds like, you got to go above that to make them understand, because you're going to want to know more. And I remember being in school, being like, okay, so why is this happening? Because you, especially as a student, and you're being taught, you want to understand, the whole thing, which to some degree you can't go complete into it, but you want to go above that base level of, okay, you just got to know this. Well, no, you're going to need to understand more than that just to be able to meet that base level. Because not everybody's going to grasp that, too. You want to go a little bit higher. But, Trish, she damn sure would make sure we were well and above our base level of paramedic knowledge to understand everything. And I see that now. Well, I hope it's changing. But I would see that sometimes, I'd get back on a truck or I'd meet a paramedic, rendezvous with the paramedic crew with the air. That it would come with, like cookbook medic stuff, just like, oh, the protocol says I got to do this. Okay, well, if you thought a little critically on it, this isn't just everything. I know you saw like, okay, check these boxes, but, there's other stuff going on too.
If you have A, you do A. If you have B, you do B. But what happens if you have A, B, and D?
Yeah. And it's kind of, and I feel like it's getting a little bit better. I don't know. I'm not on the truck anymore, but I kind of feel like maybe there's like a little bit of tide turning to going back to more critical thinking. I hope so anyways.
I hope
at least
so too.
But for a while there, it felt very much like it was, a very structured, okay, if you just see these things, just do these things, which I appreciate from my protocols from the air. I mean, we have guidelines or SOGs and stuff, but they give us a lot of freedom of, if you can justify what's right for the patient and it doesn't necessarily fit into these specific boxes like you might see at some places, okay, you did what's best for the patient. That's what's most important. And I appreciate the tar out of that.
And if you've got a good medical director, if you've got good equipment and all of that, just do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Fix them,
Yeah. I mean, you want to do what's best for the patient no matter what. And that's what I always go back to is, okay, can I justify this is what's best for the patient? Yep. Okay. This is what we need to do. And not to say I'm 100% right all the time, but, luckily I'm blessed in a helicopter. I got somebody in the back with me. Sometimes, most time in the ambulance you don't until somebody gets driving. But
you're so lucky you have somebody. You saw in there that I also worked as a flight medic for a little while.
Yeah, I saw that. It said flight medic, and then I was like ground service. And I was going to ask you about that. I was like, so is that working as a flight medic or on the ground? Or
No, it's flight medic. In Region 7, we never had a helicopter program in Region 7 until 1988.
Yeah.
But we had a mast unit at Fort Benning. And the mast unit had a whole bunch of us that were eager beavers that loved to fly.
Yeah.
And if you had like an interfacility critical care transfer, they'd call us up and they'd say, hey, you want to go on a flight? Sure. Be at the medical center in 15 minutes. And we would do critical care transfers. We'd take people to UAB. We'd take them to Emory. We'd take them to the Burn Center. And that was always cool because when we first started doing it, they were still in Hueys.
I was about to say, what were y'all flying in?
We started in Hueys, and I loved the Hueys because it was like, it's loud, it's noisy and all of that, but you get to Birmingham, you drop your patient off, and this was back when the budget for the military was short and pilots weren't getting a lot of flight time. So you drop them off at UAB, and the pilot would say, all right, we got to go out to the guard terminal at the airport and fuel up. What are you doing today? I'm like, whatever you want me to do. They'd file a flight plan. They'd say there's weather between us and Fort Benning. We're going to have to fly by way of Dobbins. They'd get to Dobbins and they'd fuel up and they'd say there's weather between us and Fort Benning. We're going to have to fly by way of Robbins. And so they'd end up going on a big round-robin flight just to get flight time. And I loved it because the Hueys, you got the door when you're on a back transport. I'm sitting in the door gunner cubby back there. I'm sitting here and my feet are on the rail and I've got a 4-point harness on and I am out in the air. And the Hueys are so slow that we would be flying along, and if they were flying into a headwind, I look down on the road and there's cars going by. And we always, when we would come back from UAB, we flew over Auburn University. War Eagle. And we would fly over Auburn University. And back in those days, they didn't have co-ed dorms. They had women's dorms. And the women used to sunbathe on top of the women's dorms. And so the helicopter pilots would come along and fly at pretty high altitude and see which way the wind was blowing. And so they would go downwind and get down at treetop level and come flying back and pop up over the women's dormitory and just kind of rotate the helicopter. And these girls are up there sunbathing topless and in the nude. And it's funny because about half of them are going, ooh, and about half of them are going. But we did that, but then the whole trauma center thing, when trauma center designation first came along, there was a big fight in the state of Georgia because there was federal funds available about being a designated trauma center.
Yeah.
And in Columbus, you had the medical center and St. Francis were the two big competing hospitals, and both of them wanted trauma center designation. And they were doing all kind of different things to work on trying to beat the other one out. St. Francis built a new ER, and when they built the new ER, they put an elevator to the roof of the ER and a helipad and let the rumor out they were going to get a helicopter. They couldn't get a helicopter. They were right in the flight path of Columbus Airport, okay? But medical center didn't see this. Medical center is like, we want to be trauma center, so we need to have a helicopter. And so, boom, we're going to set up a helicopter service. And so they got the private ambulance service that was there, MedLife, and they said, y'all are going to run a helicopter service. And so basically they got a bunch of us that liked flying, about 4 or 5 paramedics, and they contracted with Mid-State Executive and got us an A-Star that, was fixed up with everything and got us the Corps pilots. That was it. It was a pilot and a medic.
Oh, wow.
I know. I mean, I can remember one time we did a pickup of a Pope water that had logs roll over him. And he had an acute abdomen and he had a closed head injury. And so blood pressure, all kind of different things were going on. And we didn't have a vent on the helicopter. They went bare basement. And so you've just got the bag. And I can remember flying to Macon over Lake Toba-Sofiki, having to look over at my pilot and say, hey, can you lock the collective and reach over here and bag for me for just a minute? I mean, it was a unique experience. And this is old days. This is back GPS and all first came out. And so one of the things that we did when we set up programs, we went out and we did PRs in all the communities that we're going to. And when we would do the PR, we had a very rudimentary GPS in the helicopter. It had a bar with lights on it. And the little light came on showing whatever direction you were going, and this is where you wanted to be. And so you pointed the helicopter until the bars on the light lined up. And it had a mileage counter on there in tenths of a mile. And so we went out everywhere that we were going to possibly land. We designated LZs. We met with the local volunteer fire departments, and we put together a book. In the book, we would take pictures from the air of what was up above.
Yeah.
We would put all that new info. But you'd go out on a call in the middle of the night. You'd get in the helicopter. You'd be flying over absolute blackness. And it just used to be so cool to me. You would watch that number, beep, beep, beep. And when it hit 0, you looked out your window and there were flashing lights down there. But we ran the program for about a year, and then the medical center got trauma center designation, and they shut it down.
Yeah, I never knew they ran a program over there like that.
They did. MedLife helicopter. I've got some pictures of it somewhere. There was, like I say, there was 4 of us, and it was a one medic program. You know, you had a pilot and you had a medic.
Yeah.
We had one of the coolest pilots I've ever met. His name was Chris Breet. If you ever can go back and look at the old Winston cigarette commercials from back in the 70s,
yeah,
when you could have cigarette commercials, they had pictures of like men doing manly things, and it's like guy hanging off a helicopter working on power lines and stuff like that. He was in all of those. He was a contract pilot, and he was flying the helicopter for Hollywood, and they're doing these different things, and the ad agencies are like, what actor is that you've got flying the helicopter? That's not an actor. He's photogenic. Sign a contract for him. And so he ended up doing all of these. He was my age, and he had 6 years of combat flying, because he grew up in Rhodesia, and you know that was back when Rhodesia was having a
the Rhodesian War. Ooh.
And so he was for 3 years he was door gunner. They flew Alouettes, and he was door gunner on an Alouette. Then he finished his national service and went back to college. Then they called everybody up and they sent him to pilot school, and he flew with the Celis Scouts, which I don't know if you know anything about. Rhodesia was being attacked by guerrillas coming in from 3 or 4 different directions around. And so these were like our SF guys. They went over the borders, raided the guerrilla camps, attacked the railroad lines where supplies were being brought in. I mean, just really slick guys. And one of the things that they used to do is they used to shoot up trains. When I would be doing a back flight with Chris, he's flying along, we're at 1,000 feet, and he's like, Jimmy, I see a train. You know what we're going to do, don't you? And I'm like, oh, Chris, no. He'd look down at the train, and he would look for a curve in the railroad track, and he would dive down. He'd take the helicopter, and he would hover about 15 or 20 feet off the track. And when the locomotive came around the corner, he would tilt that thing forward and go straight at the locomotive at 100 miles an hour. And we popped up so close over the top of the locomotives that we would get turbulence from the fans on top of the locomotives.
Oh yeah, dude, they'd have a heart attack now if the air or medevac now is so highly regulated, maintained, or regulated that you get going to quickness.
Well, it's kind of, I hate to say it, but it's good that they shut the program down.
Yeah.
Because Midstate, he worked for Midstate, and it was their helicopter. And when Medical Center shut the program down, they repurposed the helicopter, and they had it up in Atlanta as a transport helicopter, picking people up from the airport and taking them out to different businesses. And about 3 months after our program got shut down, he lost pitch control at about 300 feet over a golf course out in Marietta.
Yeah, there's some. I don't know how many stories there are of pilots, messing around like that and lose control or whatever, whether it be double IMC or whatever SUs, but they don't play around with that anymore.
Now, he couldn't help it. The helicopter was old and worn out. They figured out that the swash plate broke loose, and the swash plate just went straight up. And when it went straight up, no pitch control.
Man, I'm so glad that they maintain ours. I'm sure all the companies now, I would assume, I hope so anyways, well maintain ours, and they don't play around with, starts, time, constant inspections, and people, there'll be times we're out for maintenance for a couple of days or they find some issue. But I'm glad they do. And, every base, at least, with my company, has their own mechanic. And our mechanic, that helicopter is his baby. And if he's out sick or which he's out right now, and he injured himself, but he that's his baby. And he'll check on his baby. And he is... I joke that he's undiagnosed, kind of autistic, because he's older. He wasn't diagnosed, but he's got some OCD, and some stuff can be irritating. But I appreciate the tar out of his OCD, because that helicopter, he is going to look it over. When he comes in, do his checks, and but I greatly appreciate that, and I love our mechanic, our AMT, to death. Which I'm sure I would assume a lot of all the services now have people like that, but there's some good ones, and I've learned that too. We've had other mechanics come in. Not that they're bad, but you get used to your mechanic and how he does stuff, just like pilots or anything, and you appreciate the tar out of the people that and their own dedication to stuff.
We actually had a pilot mechanic.
Oh, yeah?
One of our pilots back during Vietnam era and all of that, he wanted to be a helicopter pilot, and then Vietnam stopped. And so they cut way back on the training, and so they made him a helicopter mechanic. And he was in the Army for about 6 years as a helicopter mechanic. Then he used a GI Bill to go to flight school. And he got not only a rotary, but he got fixed wing and multi-engine. And so he flew with us, but he also did a whole lot of the mechanical work. And then after our program shut down, he had the absolute dream job. There was some guy down in Florida, a rich Jewish businessman, that had factories all over the United States. And this guy had a Lear, and he had a Jet Ranger. And whenever he wanted to go to visit one of his factories, one of his pilots, all of his pilots were dual certified. One of his pilots would take the Jet Ranger, and about 2 days in advance, they'd take the Jet Ranger and they'd do hops so that they could be in Denver or Cheyenne or wherever.
Yeah.
And then the other one would take the Lear and fly him there. And then when he was there, he had his helicopter to flit around in. And then when they got done, the Lear took him home and the helicopter came home. And it would be funny because Andy, when he would be coming home, they basically said, take your time if you want to go see somebody or something. And so, I'd be sitting around and I'd get a phone call. Hey, man, I'm going to be in Columbus. Can I spend the night at your house? Yeah. And he'd fly into the airport out there, and, he just got to go all over the country doing that. There
was a fire captain when I started the fire department. He left a few years, I think he left while I was there, a couple of years after, but... basically, what he was telling me, his brother was a retired military pilot, and he was retired from the military, and all he did then was something similar, was I guess he knew rich folks,
yeah.
And as a helicopter pilot, they'd call him up and be like, hey, I want to go here, and we're going to be here for however long, and then once you come get us, bring us back, and they'd call him, and he'd go hop in their helicopter, pick them up, fly them wherever, and then whenever they want to come back and pick him up, he'd come back, pick them up in their helicopter, fly him back, and he just retired through his Army pension or whatever, and that's what he did as his, I guess, additional income. He just flew around for the rich folks and took them wherever, like they're a little helicopter Uber driver. And I was like, man, that does sound pretty awesome.
My wife's uncle kind of did something like that. Back during Vietnam, he wanted to be a jet fighter pilot. Got in the Air Force, went through ROTC and all of that.
Yeah.
They had too many pilots, so they made him a backseater. And he was a weapons officer on a Wild Weasel. The Wild Weasels were the ones that went into North Vietnam to where the missiles were and tried to get the missiles to shoot at them. Huh. I mean, it was it had like 50% casualty rate. But when he got out of the military, he used his GI Bill and went back and got his fixed wing. And he flew as an airline pilot for a while with Eastern. And then when Eastern shut down, he did charter flights. For a while, he did charter flights in the Caribbean. He'd pick up Jimmy Buffett, all these other different people, flip them around.
Yeah.
Then he went out to Midland, Odessa, and flew out there. Do you watch Landman, Taylor Sheridan?
No, I've watched some of the clips of it, but I haven't watched any of the episodes, like full episodes.
You need to watch it.
I need to.
But in Landman, they've got an aircraft that works out of the FBO out there that they use all the time. And he was watching the show with us the other night, and he was like, I've flown out of there, and I did this, and he was pointing out all kind of stuff because what was in the show, he actually did that. They have executive jets out there, and they'll take people all over the country. And he was a charter pilot like that.
Huh. That's interesting. Some of the pilots I've met through the years flying, a lot of them did oil rig workers and stuff. Which the pilots, there's any range of jobs they did, from flying tours up around New York City to Apache, Black Hawk, Las Vegas, and a lot of oil rig guys. And some of those oil rig guys told me stories about oil workers loading up and having to land on the platforms with like the crazy winds and stuff. I'm like, man, that sounds unpleasant. He's like, man, I'm telling you. He's like, some of that stuff be sketchy. And he's like, you can't land. He's like, it's the water. He's like, so you got to make it to the oil rig. And some of that stuff is pretty crazy. Talking about landing on the oil rigs and the winds and, I guess it was a little more unregulated back in the day probably too, of like, okay, they're maxing out on fuel and you got to go all the way out here with all this weight. And they're like, man, you're landing and you ain't got much fuel and you got to make it on this pass. And like, it's just kind of crazy, the stuff they talk about back in the day with the oil rig stuff and flying helicopters out there. I mean, before I got into doing this, I wouldn't have thought much about that aspect of oil rig stuff, but I was like, oh man, it does sound kind of crazy, loading all these people up, maxing out the helicopter, because you got to take as many people as you can and all the equipment you can, and it's just kind of crazy. It's all different stories. And there's one pilot I've met, he worked police up around Atlanta. I don't know if it's GSP or whoever, but some of the police stories he got, he's like, oh man, it was fun. He's like chasing people in a helicopter and all this stuff he's got, being a police, or I guess law enforcement, whatever pilot. It's pretty interesting. Talk about stuff. Which our helicopter we fly now used to be I think it was a sheriff's department police helicopter. It used to have it's a Bell 407, but it used to have the sliding door. And man, we used to love that sliding door because it's so easy to get in and out of. Which we can't fly with it open, but law enforcement I'm sure did. But yeah, getting out of the helicopter instead of having to open, like the double door, how they fold, just slide it open. And you had a little door. And then they went to refurb and it got a refurbished, new paint job, all new stuff. It got redone, and they took away our sliding door. We were all upset. We loved our sliding door.
We had an A-Star, and I don't know if you know anything about it. They're a pain in the ass to load people.
All I heard about, everything anybody's ever told me about the A-Star, the first thing, was a medic. They told me the medic seat is about half the width, and only about half your butt fits on it, and the patient's right between your legs.
And the patient's legs you can't get to because the patient's legs are up underneath the dash. You've got access down to about waist, and that's it on the patient. It's not a lot of space in there.
Well, that's just like our 407s. We have a console on the right side that comes back to probably about armpit. When they've slid in, it probably comes back to about their armpit when they're kind of laying down. It's just a center console where the radios are and stuff. And on the left side, you got the windows. So we can't really access their lower body very well in flight. If you have to, but basically I have to crawl over them. But there's times, talking about pilots, if we got somebody that's been a little agitated for whatever reason, just trying to keep them well sedated. If we got a long flight, I'll tell the pilots, hey, you see feet or something start wiggling up there, let me know, because I don't want nobody kicking the windows out or anything in a helicopter, and I'll be telling them, hey, you see them start wiggling? Let me know. Because I'm sitting right behind them, and I see the head and stuff, especially if they're sitting up, but I can't really see down there until it's too late, till them legs are coming up high. But I'll tell them, hey, they start wiggling, you let me know. I don't want nobody kicking you, which there's a little barrier and stuff, but still, people, nothing against them necessarily. If they're not in the right mind, they can, I don't want anybody taking down a helicopter. Not with me in it. Not any helicopter, especially not one with me in it.
So how does your family feel about you and the helicopter thing?
Well, my parents passed away. My mom passed away 3 years ago. My dad passed away in 2016 before I started flying. But my wife, she was a little more leery of it when I first was going to start doing it. But I was doing a lot of long transport stuff too before I started flying, and I think that made her more nervous. Doing these 3-4 hour transports late at night, you're tired. Atlanta drivers driving up to Atlanta from here, or Augusta, from where we are in Southwest Georgia, there's no good way to get to Augusta. I'm sure if you've ever driven to come from Columbus, it's similar.
No
There's no good way. And so driving those 2-lane back roads at night, you know, when you're tired, 3.5 hours one way and you got a serious patient, then to drive back when you're got less adrenaline going is more dangerous. So I think from that aspect, she was a little better about it. And I think once she got to know, like, our pilots and how well they maintain the helicopters and everything, she's more comfortable with it. You know, which, like I said, they're very safe. You know, some people complain about, there's a cloud in the sky, helicopter's not going to fly. But a lot of people don't understand. You want us to go from Southwest Georgia to Atlanta. There's a lot of weather that can happen between here and there. And especially if we want to go south, like Jacksonville or Gainesville, there are no weather reporting stations in the Okefenokee Swamp, and it can develop its own weather. So you don't want to be over that sometimes at 3 in the morning if you think fog's going to roll in. But either way, you know, she's more comfortable with it now. But you know, I think she's said too, I'd be more concerned about you going back on the truck doing any kind of long transport stuff, because it's not the same. I don't want to say caliber. It's not the same type of people. You know, there's a lot of turnover in EMS, and for me to be on the truck with like a brand new person, you know, that's going to drive me to Atlanta, you know, she's a little more leery of that than if, you know, it's an experienced person that's got a lot of ambulance driving experience. Look, and I've told her this probably to the detriment of that, of some bad stories. I've had newbies. I had one girl almost put the back of the ambulance through the bay doors of a hospital. Like, you know, you got the stop curbs. She could reverse so poorly, she backed up between the stop curbs and was waiting to hit one of those and never stopped. And when I opened the doors, the tailboard of the ambulance was literally less than 2 feet from the back sliding doors of the bay. I don't know how the doors didn't just open, like, you know, because they detected movement. I opened the doors and I said, "Oh my Lord, girl, you got to pull forward. You almost put us in the bay." And so I think, you know, stories like that kind of worried her more. Of like, that person might have to drive my husband for the critical patient too. You go far away,
and they're out.
And it is, and not necessarily that, but like drivers. You know, I mean, like we joked about before. You know, you pulled up a motorcycle. It's a lot of other drivers worry about it too. Everybody's on their cell phone. And, you know, just the craziness of that. Where at least in the sky, I don't have to worry about. I mean, you have to worry about cross traffic, but you know, it's not the same as on the ground.
Makes me think of another old medic tale from 1979 when I was working up in the county. We had a driver like that. You know, back then we had drivers that just had a CPR card and that's it. But we had a critical patient. There was a lady that had overdosed on Valium and she wasn't breathing. You know, back then we didn't have any antidote for the Valium. And so the assistant chief, who's cardiac tech, had met the ambulance and is riding, and I'm sitting in the jump seat and I'm bagging this lady, and he's over here doing something. He's got the drug kit open. I don't even know what he's doing. And this guy that is driving runs a stop sign, and car zips across, and he didn't hit the other car, but he stomped on the brakes, and there was absolutely no warning. I'm bagging this woman, and suddenly she has slid up to where I'm bagging her right here. And I looked at my partner, and I saw him in slow motion pick up in the air, turn sideways, slam into the wall, and fall down into the hole down here. And there's quiet, and, you know, you hear from up front, "Guys, I'm sorry, man, I didn't mean to do that." And I hear this voice from down in the hole. "I swear to God, I'm going to kill him. As long as I live, I'm going to kill him." You know?
It's, you know, I don't know if it's old age or just the people, like, because I don't know them. I'll hop in the ambulance now if we got to, like, ground transport. Which the other day I had to do a 2-hour. Well, we had to divert. Well, South Georgia is on fire. A lot of it's on fire right now in some of the swamp, but we couldn't make it to Jacksonville, so we had to go back to Waycross and then get an ambulance to go from Waycross to Jacksonville. It's 2-hour ground pound because we couldn't make the flight because of the smoke. And I got in the captain's seat and I put the full harness on they had now. My partner looked at me. I was like, "Look, man, I know too many people have been ambulance wrecks, and you know, these new ones, you know, they can stretch and you can reach a patient." I said, "I'm gonna put my harness on. I don't, you know, I trust the person that's driving us. They seem like they know what they're doing, but I put my full harness on. Like, I don't want to get thrown around."
In the old days, you know, you just had to kind of learn to surf and do and all of that. Nobody thought about it.
Yeah, you have to kept a hand on the top rail. You know, if you had to stand up working on the patient, you're going to learn to do one-handed. You're going to hold on to that rail. And now, in my older age, I'm a little bit more less prone to do that. You know, if I need to, which I'm not on ambulance as much anymore. But it's just, I've had several friends that have been in ambulance wrecks, whether it be their fault or another driver's fault, and that stuff worries me. People getting thrown into the wheel well down there and everything, and
you get hurt. I mean, you get people that have permanent injuries.
Mm-hmm.
They do.
And I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that. If I got a choice, I'm going to sit in that captain seat and I'm going to buckle in. I want to chance it now. And I think that's, like I said, probably goes back to my wife and being in a helicopter. I think she probably feels to some degree me being safer in there than on the ground doing a transport. I mean, each have their problems, but
I know mine. I had a friend of mine who's a flight medic that was trying to get me to go back to doing it, and my wife was like, nope. Hey, this guy, Gary Metcalf, I don't know if you know him. He flies whatever the services are that fly up in and around the Columbus area. He's been flying for probably 15 or 20 years now.
Yeah.
He's an RN paramedic, and super, super good guy. But I don't know many of the flight medics anymore. They're overutilized nowadays, aren't they? Yeah,
there is. And I mean, that's the thing is, I started in 2021, right at the tail end of COVID, is when I started flying. So I got on the ground and I got to do all the COVID transports here in Albany, a bunch of them. But I see where, like, ever since COVID, ambulances in Georgia have been short-staffed. I would say 95% of departments are shorter now than they've probably ever been. And so, here rurally, we got a lot of little counties that are like, hey, we just don't have an ambulance to send. They're not necessarily, fitting to die or anything right now, but they have to get there, and we have no way to get them there. And so we get utilized a fair bit for that. And it gets people burnt out of, like, why are they calling the helicopter, and I kind of just have to, in my own mind, I kind of be like, well, I'm here. This is what I'm getting paid to do. If it's easy transport, okay, I don't have much paperwork. Not much charting to do.
Well,
but and it's the trade off. Like, I don't know, like it's I go back and forth on it because when you've had a long day, long shift, and then at 3 a.m. they call you for basically a BLS air transport. You're like, why are they calling us? But I get it. You talk to them there, and you're like, our hands are kind of tied. We don't have an ambulance to send, but they got to get there and. It's a long way to go, or you know what I mean? Like I guess nobody's really got a good answer for it.
I know up there where we are, even though I worked in Georgia, I live in Alabama across the river, and there's private helicopter service that does business up there, and I think they're tremendously overutilized. And I give you a perfect example. I came up on a wreck one day going to work. We are 7 miles from the hospital. And the wreck's down here. The closest LZ is up there, and I helped cut the people out of the car, and then I'm going ahead and heading to work. And the helicopter is up there sitting on the ground waiting, and yet I went right by the hospital going to work, and the helicopter wasn't there yet. If they had just put them, because they put them in the back of the ambulance to carry them to the helicopter. Then with what y'all do, you've got your own monitoring equipment that you have to put on. I mean, for you to put somebody in a helicopter, it's going to take you, close to 10 minutes maybe to be able to get everything done.
Yeah, like the fastest I've ever probably got from when I landed to lifted was probably like 15 minutes or less, maybe like 13. If they had like everything done and we're just slapped them on our stuff, throw them in the helicopter.
And I mean, this place, when the helicopter lifted up in the air, I'm sure they could see the hospital.
Yeah.
And so you wonder in a case like that why, the helicopter's here, so we might as well use it. But it's the same token. When you get to the hospital, there's a delay because you pull up in the bus and you pull right up, pop them out, and you're into a treatment room. You land with your helicopter, and you got to wait for the blade to wind down.
Well, we can hot offload, and we will if they're critical enough.
Yeah.
But, unless they absolutely need the time, it's safer for us to shut down and cold offload.
And even with a hot offload, it's sitting out there on the helipad, and you've got to get everything out there to the helicopter. Then y'all have got to disconnect all the stuff that you've got and go in. And I just, I love helicopters. I think they're great, especially from working rural EMS. I appreciate helicopters. I mean, they've been lifesavers for patients that I've had out in the country. But I think a lot of times in the urban setting and all nowadays, the insurance money will pay for them, and so let's go ahead and do it, and that just kind of adds to the overall health care cost,
Yeah, and there's been situations, and this has been more so when I've had to fly into Alabama. And I guess there's like some more rural services over in Alabama. I've flown into some places where they've called a helicopter for like a possible stroke. And I'll tell you about one incident that sticks out in my mind. We got called a possible stroke, which there was no comprehensive stroke center around. Closest one would fly him to Atlanta, and which would have been like an hour flight, roughly. And so we land, get this guy talking to the crews. They pull up. They pulled up at the same time we landed, and we landed at a small hospital. I don't even think it had like I don't even know if it was a primary stroke center. And I'm sitting here talking to the guy, and I'm like, hey, so what's going on with this guy? You know, get all the basics of, like, when's his last known well? You know, what's the deficits he got, yada, yada. Well, he's got slurred speech. I'm like, okay, has he got weakness on one side? Is he aphasic or, whatever? And they're like, no, it's just a slurred speech. And I'm like, is he there with it? Is he alert and oriented? Times 30? Yeah, he's completely with it. And I start talking to this guy. He's completely with it, but his speech is slurred. Mm-hmm. And I started talking to him, started talking about meds and stuff. And this guy takes like gabapentin. He takes trazodone. He takes, might have been like a Xanax. It's all this sedating medication for him to sleep. And it's like 9 o'clock in the morning. He's got no deficits, nothing, completely with it. I'm like, I think this guy has just got a little polypharmacy. Yeah. Like, I think he's just got all these meds on board. I don't think he's having a stroke, and he's completely with it, but just slurred speech. But a little drowsy. And I'm like, I don't really think this guy needs to be flown to a stroke center. But it was kind of not my main area. I was helping out, and I told the nurse partner I was with, I was like, I think this guy just needs to go inside and sleep off these meds. But you want to do what's right for the patient. I can't scan him. And I'm there, and I'm like, then as we flew, it was like a 45, I think it was just under an hour flight. By the time we got there, he was seeming a little better, and I'm like, I don't think this guy needed to go here. But it's kind of those things, we're seeing a few instances like that when I've flown into Alabama, and it's been like a BLS truck, like not even a paramedic. And, there's been some instances where I didn't think they needed a helicopter. But
Alabama's field EMS care is not what it is in the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
If you're in an urban area over there, it's pretty good. But in so many of the places, they got private EMS over there. There's just not as much in the way.
I didn't realize there's so many BLS trucks just operating in Alabama. Because there were several times I flew over there to scenes, and it was just a BLS truck. Mm-hmm. And I get it. Like, we don't even have a paramedic, so we're going to call in a helicopter because we think this might be what is going on with them. Yeah. And, it's nothing against the crews on the ambulance, but it's more like, I don't think they really need a helicopter. But we'll fly them. We'll make sure. But, we get a ton of flights. I think Georgia, they say, for our company, is like the busiest state in their region or whatever. And so I get it. But I don't know. There's not a good answer for it. We don't want to, turn down patients and transfers, but especially rurally, they got to go a long way. And there's not a lot of ambulances to take them.
I know the private that we used in Marion County, I was always appreciative of them because they're like, if you think you're going to need us, call us. Yeah. We'd a hell of a lot rather have you, we're halfway there, say the situation is okay, we'll turn around and go back, instead of waiting until you get on the scene and you've got to wait on them. Because I had a bunch of calls out there. The helicopter's life and death. It really was getting the patient in, and they were always quick getting in and out. I don't know. I think it's air evac.
Probably. There's the America's base that's over there. It's probably the closest one to Marion, I think.
Well, that's the ones that we used to get.
Yeah, and we'll tell them that same thing. We'll tell people to call us. And there's been several times I've been over like a wreck scene, and we'd be circling. All right, where's your LZ going to be? I'm like, okay, patient's not that bad. We don't need you, and we're not upset about it. Especially scenes. Everybody in flight loves a good scene. Mm-hmm. We get a ton of transfers now, and there's nothing wrong with transfers, but scenes are more exciting. Mm-hmm. You never know.
Let's face it. Why do we do this?
Yeah. And so everybody loves a good scene, and I guess it's kind of the needs more immediate too. Not that whoever's doing a critical patient in a hospital doesn't need an immediate transfer, but it's like more like the immediate difference, and it's more, I guess, high stress, high adrenaline, or whatever. Yeah. Everybody loves a good scene, so nobody that I know of is upset about getting dispatched for a scene. If they get turned down, they might be upset, like, oh man, they don't need us. Not that we don't want anybody to be hurt, but you want to put your skills to use. So
that just takes us down a whole different road, something that I just thought about, and especially with the way that they teach people nowadays. Shooting and all of that is exciting, but what skills are you going to utilize? Mm-hmm. If it's got a hole in it, cover it. If it's got tension, pop it. Get fluid going and all of that. Whereas with a medical call, you're the detective. You've got stuff that you're trying to deal with. But so many of these kids nowadays are not interested in the medical calls. All they want is trauma and trauma and trauma. There's nothing to trauma. A basic EMT can treat trauma pretty much, unless they need to be intubated and need airway management. A basic can do it. You're a paramedic. You ought to appreciate being a detective and doing all of that. But so many of these people are not, I don't want to run those calls. I just want to run trauma. I ain't part of it. You need to find another job somewhere, buddy.
You can have a lot of medical calls.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a difference, like in flight, because you get. Well, I think from the nurse aspect too, they haven't seen a lot of that. And I've said before on here, there's been several calls I've had with newer flight nurses that have not been on a wreck scene before. Yeah. I think I told a story about I had a semi versus a cement truck, and there was all the resources there. There was like 5 or 6 fire engines, law enforcement at the wazoo, ambulances, huge semi wreckers trying to pull the trucks apart, and she was like, "I'm just taking all this in. I've never been on one of these." I was like, "Oh yeah, this is new to you."
It is cool.
Like this is like medics, flight medics. The ambulance is home. That's like that's your chaos you're used to. And you go into a hospital. I can remember the first ICU calls I went into. You're like sitting there looking like patients got 7 drips, and you got to put them on a vent. You're like, this is overwhelming. But to ICU nurses, like, oh, this is home. All these buttons I get to push and all these drips and stuff. Oh, this is home.
That's what it used to be. Another thing you might have seen in there, I did neonatal transport.
Oh, yeah.
Columbus is such an odd place. They've got a neonatal nursery there. It's one of the regional high-risk nurseries. And when they did transports, they always sent an RN and a respiratory therapist. Well, they got this bright idea. We don't have to pay paramedics as much as we do respiratory therapists, and so we're going to put paramedics on there. And so they took a bunch of us, and they put us through neonatal transport tech. I loved it. I mean, it was really neat. You learn all kind of little baby things that you didn't know how to do. But that was just the nurses. You'd go out on calls and just exactly like you're talking about. The ones that work in the units, they're like bing, 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 bing. And it took me the longest time to get comfortable because, and especially with babies, a lot of stuff is feel. And the nurses look at it and they're just, that's it. And, you're looking at it and you're saying, I think it's this and I think we ought to do this, but it's a whole different ballgame.
It's the hardest thing for me on kids to understand that they have a faster, well, not to understand, but it's the hardest thing for me to understand, and it's taken me a long time, that they will burn through some meds. So, and like you don't want to overdose a kid on any medicine, but you're like, oh no, they need it. They're burning through it. Kind of like a burn patient with pain meds or whatever. But a lot of these children, especially, they got a faster metabolism, maybe a higher pain threshold. They don't understand what's going on, more sedation. And you're like, man, I just feel like I'm about to, knock this kid too far out or something. Or, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like I'm giving them way too much. And you look at the protocols and you're like, okay, this is well within our protocols. It just seems kind of unnatural because you're used to the adult dosing on stuff. And that's still how, which you don't get as many pediatric patients as adult, but still you're double checking stuff because you're triple checking it. You're like, is this right? Yeah, it is. Okay. Go up a little bit, but peds can take a lot of meds sometimes, and that's,
Well, that goes back also to what we talked about, having the feel, though.
Yeah.
You've done it, an experienced flight medic versus an inexperienced flight medic. You just got to use the force.
Well, it just goes back to the basics of treat your patient, not the monitor.
Yeah.
So many times you get caught up on numbers, and you're like, is this the patient or the monitor? Like, I've had vents that have messed up. They're saying they're delivering this much volume. I'm like, that's not right. Or they're saying they're hitting all this pressure. And, I've popped people off the vent and I started bagging them. Like, that is not correct on pressure. And I actually had like a big QA phone call, like our medical director and a bunch of people, because we had a vent issue. And I was like, I wasn't in trouble, but it was more so they didn't know why I took them off the vent and bagged them in the last 20 minutes. So I was like, look, I went through 2 vent sets and there was some issue going on with the vent. And the best thing I do for the patient was just to bag them. The vent, we'd worked for 45 minutes doing different stuff, give meds to the patient, and what it was telling me was not accurate. And they were like, well, and to the medical director's credit, he wasn't being an a-hole.
Yeah.
But he was more so, I guess, trying to feel me out. He's like, well, do you know how much volume's in a bag? I'm like, yeah, like 1,600 cc's. Well, how much volume did that patient need? I was like, probably like 400 cc's roughly, give or take. And like, well, were you squeezing the whole bag? I was like, no, it's roughly squeezing like a quarter of it. And they're like, well, you're probably just pushing it harder and create more pressure than you realize. Like, lady, I've been bagging people for a long time, and there was not that much pressure on this person. And like, well, you're probably bagging them faster, because I could bag them up real quick. Like 20, 30 seconds, I could bag CO2 be back down to normal, O2 be back up. And I'm like, something's going on with this vent or the set or something. Some kind of diagnostic equipment within that vent was not reading correctly. And so I said, no. I said, the rate, I was bagging them probably about 20 times a minute, And they said, well, let's look at your vital signs and see. And okay, here it is. Okay, here's 18. Here's 20, and here's 20. And I'm like, yeah, like I said, like 1 every 3. I've been bagging people for a long time. I've been bagging people for my whole EMS career, And but it was more so that I was trying to do what's best for the patient, and I just bagged them the rest of the way in. And I think it was much more of the concern of, was there a problem with the vent, or were you just not knowing what you were doing with the vent from their aspect?
Yeah.
But it wasn't, and that issue with the vent got resolved. They, I guess, had an update or something, but that issue didn't happen. But either way, it was the best thing for the patient. I wasn't treating my monitor; I was treating the patient. I was like, that is just not right. You've done it enough to whatever degree of whatever piece of equipment. You're like, this isn't correct. You got to feel, you got to hunch. This ain't right. I'm going to investigate this, which goes, I guess, like critical thinking, And
that's where you've got to have trust between your in-hospital providers and you. They've got to know you. They've got to be able to trust your skills and your judgment in a situation like that. And I can feel for the docs a lot of times too, because a doc, he's out there and he doesn't know you. He doesn't know what's going on out there, but it's on his license and it's his butt if you're not doing it right and if he doesn't do something about it. You know? But that's where it's really important to have trust back and forth between and to know people. Do y'all have regular docs that you work with, or is it the contract physician thing where they're coming and going a lot?
Well, we have our medical director and chief medical directors of the company, and so we deal with our main medical director a lot. We have town halls, usually 1 or 2 a month, and we have a grand rounds we do every few months.
Basically so for check QA and stuff like that, you're not dealing as much with facility docs as you're doing.
Oh no, we do our its own in-house stuff. We do with our QA. Like other crews review your reports, and then medical director, she does, and we have educators too. They'll look over some of them. I don't want to say all of them, but they're probably a good bit of them. The educators look, and if it was a serious call, you can flag it. Like if there's a lot going on, or if you had some kind of anomalous thing, so they can peer into it to correct a problem. And it's none of it's punitive. I mean, they want to make you a better provider. So if you have questions like, hey, this was something weird, and I don't know why I had this reading, can you look into this? And maybe it was me. Maybe it was a piece of equipment. You look into it, see if I did anything wrong. So it's good. I've had more issues with newer docs or newer respiratory therapists. Like, for example, I had a post-cardiac arrest young girl who was... I think she had a lot of polypharmacy, recreational polypharmacy, and she was found down in a hotel room. I think she was respiratory arrest, and when cardiac arrest, they got her back. She was early 20s. But we joke about, respiratory therapists can be a respiratory terrorist, but there's some really good respiratory therapists, and there's some that, are the set it and forget it. PRVC, I got stuff to do. Other patients, they're PRVC and done. So rotisserie moves, we joke about. But to their defense, a lot of respiratory therapists have a lot of patients they have to see in the hospital. They can't sit and look at one patient like we can. I'm going to dedicate to this one patient on a vent. I can watch the vent the whole time. So there was this girl, and they had her set at a rate of 20, and they had PRVC, maximum volume was 500, and she is over breathing the tar out of the vent. They got her on several meds like propofol. They might have had her on, I don't know, it might have been a Versed drip too. They had her on several things that can keep her sedated enough. But she is banging away, 500, 500, 500, 500, and she's respiratory rate 38, 40. Just banging away at this thing. And they're like, oh, yeah, well, her blood gas when she came in.
PCO2?
I don't even remember. But the respiratory therapist was like, her blood gas was terrible when she came in, but we gave her 2 amps of bicarb, and now her pH is good. I'm like,
her pH is good.
Yeah, do you understand? You just gave that. Now you create a lot of CO2, and she's trying to blow all this off. Yeah. And so you got step 1. Yeah, you realize step 1's good, but do you realize step 2, 3, 4 down the road, what you've created? And that pH, I guarantee you, is going to go right back down when that bicarb wears off, or if she can't get rid of all that CO2 you just created by giving her all that bicarb. So I'm sitting here, and I'm trying to get this girl comfortable in the vent. You know, we do a lot of SIMV, you know, and I'm more, I lean more towards pressure mode just because I can monitor them, and I feel like it's easier on the patient doing a lot of pressure, unless they're just snowed out and volume's easy to do. But I'm sitting there trying to get her comfortable on SIMV, and I've tried a couple different things, but she is just banging away. She's got an intact respiratory drive. She is breathing every breath. And finally, I just got aggravated. I said, you know what? This girl's got such an intact respiratory drive, and she's trying to do this. Spontaneous mode it is. So I just put her, basically, it's like invasive BiPAP. Yeah. And I just let her breathe, and she's pulling like 1,600 cc volumes.
Yeah.
She's taking these huge, deep breaths like I let her breathe. And then finally, she slowed down to like 1820, volumes of like 500-600. She got comfortable on it, and I just left her in spontaneous mode. And I set like a PEEP, of like 5 or 6, whatever I had her on. I had a, but I basically just letting her breathe her own because she's taking every breath anyways. Yeah. Why do I want to limit her? And that respiratory therapist at the sending did not like that. You can't do that. You can't do that. I said, no, it's what she needs. I was like, it doesn't matter what I want. It's what she wants and what she needs.
Treat the patient, not the protocol, and not the cookbook.
Obviously, she's telling you she needs more. You said she was acidotic. You gave her this bicarb. She's trying to blow off all this CO2. And she wasn't, she didn't have high blood sugar. She wasn't hyperglycemic or anything, but it was just all I remember is we gave her a ton of ketamine trying to keep her comfortable. We used about all our ketamine on top of everything else and still didn't touch her respiratory drive. Didn't touch it. And so I just left her on spontaneous mode, and that respiratory therapist ascending called in the doc on me. And the doc was like, hey, what's going on in here? And, a lot of docs don't mess with a lot of vents. I mean, it's not really their forte. They call respiratory, something against docs. They don't mess with it. And I'm like, hey, doc, this is going on. Vital's great. CO2's good. She's comfortable on. He's like, okay, like, what's the issue? And like, respiratory. He changed her vent settings, took her off of this. And I'm like, whatever. The doc kind of was like, I don't really see the issue. I'm not super knowledgeable on the vent, but I don't see what he's doing wrong. Fly to the sending, or for the receiving, get the receiving. The respiratory therapist is like, oh, yeah, we heard the respiratory therapist already called ahead and told us what you did to the patient. And I'm like, you mean I did the right thing for my patient? And I told him, and she said, well, we're going to put him back on PRVC. And I said, as soon as you do that, I said, her rate's going to go to like 40. I said, she's going to bang away at your upper limit. I said, she's not going to like that. Well, we can't leave her on that. I said, I'm just telling you, as soon as I put her on PRVC, boom, 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 hit the limit. And I'm like, lady, I just told you exactly what's going to happen. And they couldn't handle it. And I think it's that critical thinking, like thinking outside the box and treating your patient, not the monitor. Now, I mean, I could have put her on like a, SIMV with like a higher limit, but she would have taken every breath anyways.
Yeah.
And granted, I'm right there with the patient, so if she would have stopped breathing, I could have put her on a mode to apply a breath, like SMVC or CMV or whatever. But point being, she didn't like that. And whatever she was going on with her, she was wanting to breathe on her own. And so I let her breathe on her own. But it's just, I go back like the basics. Critical thinking. What's the patient need? What do they want? And that's what that patient wanted. She was not doing good. I mean, it's not a healthy person to be breathing 40 times a minute, forced against the monitor or forced against the vent. Oh, that's not good. Hey, I solved this. No, you didn't solve it. You gave her bicarb and you made that number better, but you didn't. You actually made her worse, really. She's got to blow off all that CO2, but whatever. It's just a small story. But you get put in this box of we just do things this way, and you don't kind of critically think. Going all the way back to paramedic school, like you said, Trish, and you teaching above what you need to know. Mm-hmm. Well, here's the barrier. There's the limit of miles you need to know. You might want to know a little bit more than that to think of 2 or 3 steps down the road. So. And
then back to the auto mechanic thing. Know what's going on.
Yeah.
Know the physiology, know the pathophysiology, and that way you know what your treatment's doing.
And I tried talking to that respiratory therapist. I was like, so you gave him 2 amps of bicarb? Yeah, I got the pH up. I was like, okay. So what then? Huh? What got her pH up? She didn't grasp what I was trying to tell her.
How does bicarb work? What does it do?
Yeah.
What is the byproduct of giving the bicarb?
Yeah.
What happens to that carbonic acid? Where does it go?
How are they going to expel that?
Yeah.
Okay. You got to think about that. It's just, I mean, not that I know everything. None of us are ever going to know everything, but there's some higher level stuff you need to know past your base level. You solve that number on the blood gas, but I guarantee you that's going to be transient. I bet you it's going to come back down if you don't solve that problem you created. And that's all she wanted to talk about. But it's just, I hate to get into too much storytelling, and I don't want to hate on respiratory therapists too much, but I went to a guy that had a blockage, and he only had one side of his lungs he was using. He had a tumor, and so like the right side was not ventilating at all. And I'm sitting here, and they got him on a volume of like 450, and he's only ventilating one side. So like a normal, like we'll just say to make it simple, for everybody out there. So you might have like a normal lung volume of your applying of like 450. Well, obviously, if you're only ventilating one side of your lungs, that number is probably cut in half.
You're getting ready to pop him if you do
that. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the vent, and it's banging away at like 38, 40 on pressure, which is like usually the highest pressures you want to go to in most people, non-COVID patients. It's kind of our upper limit, like 40. Just banging away at that, hitting like 450, and I was sitting there and I was talking to a respiratory therapist. So this guy's got and I listened to his breath sounds, no air movement on one side. And I said, so he's got like this tumor, right? And it's not ventilating the side? Yeah. I said, and you got him on like 450, right? Yeah. So he's not moving any air on this side, right? Yeah. And you got him on like 450? Yeah. I just looked at my nurse partner and said, hey, I'm going to take this to like 250, and I'm going to take the rate up to like 30. And imaginally, his pressure drop. But like, it's those, I think you get caught in those modes of like, oh, it's the same thing we do every time. You don't critically think. Yeah. And it's nothing necessarily against them, but goes to the critical thinking aspect of, okay, you might want to cut that number in half. That's why your pressures are through the roof. We can't get his pressure down. You think? You think? You're about to blow out some alveoli, but I don't know. to tangent off on that.
So where else do we want to go on all of this?
Man, I don't know. You have such a history on all of this. You went deep into the education stuff. I was trying to remember what else I wanted to... I know. Well, it was an earlier thing I marked. I know you said you served as crew leader on an ALS ambulance. So is that just like the paramedic in charge, or is that just different? Okay.
We have an official designation back when we were in Columbus.
Oh, okay.
You got your paramedic. You didn't automatically get to be in charge of a truck. You had a probationary period where you had to be precepted. You would ride with a preceptor, and you would have to hit certain thresholds, and the preceptor would have to say you're ready to go. We had a jam-up service in Columbus, with all kind of little things like that we did,
Yeah, that was just terminology. I assumed it was that, I hadn't really heard before. And it's just the differences. I guess especially when you're running like a lot of rescue and stuff like that, it's a whole different environment. I worked Terrell County for a long time, and they would do, they had a rescue truck, with extrication stuff on it, but it wasn't to that degree. They just handled car extrications, which I was very much keen to do because I come from fire department, so I still got to do fire department stuff, working EMS. I like the extrication stuff. Extrication's always been fun. I think everybody works fire department stuff. Everybody loves playing with the big tool.
Oh, they do.
I don't know who doesn't.
I had touched on what we used to do with Columbus EMS, and then we kind of went in a different direction. The way that we handle the extrication is you had a set of full set of Amicus, 10,000 PSI, dual manifold on 3 different buses.
Yeah.
Then I had one on my supervisor truck, then the duty chief had one. But the way that we handled extrication was everybody in the department does extrication. So our protocol was first truck on the scene is patient care. Even if you are the truck with the rescue equipment on your truck, first truck on the scene is patient care. Second truck on the scene can go to extrication. And then the way that we used to do it, I show up as a supervisor, and I may not even have to get out my stuff, but basically what I can do is that first truck that's got the equipment and all of that on board, and they've done patient care, once extrication is done, they can totally convert to patient care and just leave their stuff sitting on the ground, and they can go ahead and go, and then I'll pick up their stuff for them and bring it back to them.
So did every ambulance have the extrication?
No, three out of 9.
Okay.
3 out of 9 had the full set. Now, the way that they've done it with the fire department now is they've gone away from the Amcus, and we've gone to a lot of the battery-powered units, and we've got every unit now has got some really basic equipment on there, and then the ladder trucks and squad trucks have got the bigger and heavier equipment. I'm still not comfortable with a lot of that new stuff that's out there in the way of the electrics. There is, in years of teaching, one of the things when I taught extrication, if you go teach extrication, don't teach your tool, teach their tool they're going to use. And so I got the opportunity to use just about everything that is on the market out there, and I have never found anything that even comes close to the Amcus 10,000 PSI. You've got spreaders. When you go with full-size Amcus spreaders, I started off in the old days with Jaws of Life. We had
I used a lot of the Hearst stuff,
we had the old original Jaws of Life. It weighed 75 pounds, but the Amcus spreader weighs about 40 pounds. But it's got the 10,000 PSI, but it's got the tips that are like that. Hearst has got all the squared-off tools. Most of the other manufacturers are like that. The Amcus is like that because what happens when you go to move? You're trying to go in and move a door or something like that, and it's always jacking back, and you're having to reposition, and it jacks back. With the Amcus, it's going to catch. I used to teach my people, when you're going in and you're doing a door, I don't try to break the lock. I try to roll them off the lock. The way that I always taught people is you come in, you grab it up at the top, make a hole if you don't have a hole already, and you put those tips in there. And as long as metal is moving, I don't reposition. Because a lot of times what will happen is you're trying to get the lock, and the patient is sitting here in the car, and all of this is impacted in on the patient, and you're attacking the lock back here. Where's the force going? The force, if metal bends, is going right into here and it's pressing in on the patient. You come up here and do the way that I teach doing it up on the top. You're up at the top, and everything that you're doing is rolling away from the patient. You're making it move away. The same thing, the dash rolls and all of that. Dash rolls, when I first got in the business, wasn't a big problem. Back in those days, cars were big and tough, and you didn't have to do dash rolls. If I had to do anything, we put chains on there, and we used the Amcus and all. But when we started having crumpled cars, now you started having to do dash rolls, and you started using rams. The problem with rams is now you've got to make relief cuts. You've got to get them in, and then when you move something with the ram, where's the patient going to go? That ram is right in the way of where the patient is going to go. With the Amcuses that we had.
Another problem being like you need multiple rams because you get a dash roll, then you can't let it go because you don't have anything else to take its place.
What I would do, I had a bunch of big old wooden blocks. In fact, some of the wooden blocks that I had came from the 1950s rescue truck that was there when I first got there. If I'm going to roll a dash, I'm going to get the door out of the way, and I would take one of those wooden blocks and put it right on the floor, right on top of at the base of the A-post. And then I would take the other end, and I just let it work up into the dash. And I'm coming at it at an angle like this, so the patient's here, and I'm coming in at an angle like this, and it's working in. And it's going to go up through that dash until it catches that dash beam. And when it catches that dash beam, it's going to lift that dash beam up. When you're doing a dash roll, you don't want to roll. All you're trying to do is create space to be able to get them out. And you do that, and once you do that and the patient is free, you can just leave your tool sitting right there. It's going to hold the dash up, and now you've got this big opening that you're coming out of.
Yeah, that was the problems I always saw with education. Like whenever you utilize the ram, was okay. You got the ram in place. Now you can't take the ram out.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Where at least Jaws of Life with the cutters, you're removing debris, or something. Where the ram, unless you got it bent up way far enough, you could let go of the pressure on it so it wouldn't go back to the form exactly the spot it was. A lot of times it's got to hold that position. You got to have something else to replace it to use it again on another bite.
They used to, when they started doing that, they started, you got to use your wedges and put your wedges in there. I don't care if you put wedges in. When you back off on the ram, it's going to come back. You're going to have movement. It's going to come back again.
Yeah. So you have to get it way past there or leave the ram in place. Or, like you said, or if you put it on the wrong side of the patient, now you have the ram in place and you can't move it.
And here's another Amcus plug. Cutters. Okay? The Amcus cutters with the dual moving blades are the best things in the world out there. Because they're going to cut through anything. You've used Hearst, you've used Matro that have got the single blade. What happens with those blades? A lot of times you go to cut, it's going to twist just like that.
Yeah.
You're trying to cut a doorpost, you're trying to cut a roof, and it's going to twist. And you're going to have to reposition and come back in and all of that. With those Amicus, with the two tips on there, you just put it in there and you let it ride. You let that thing work. It'll work up and down to find its best path, but it's just going to cut right through and it's going to pop.
I know the Hearsts we had back in the day, I believe they were Hearsts. I don't know. They would, the pinchers, the cutters, both of them would cross. But I don't know. I don't think they were Amicus.
You probably had an Omni tool. It had the spreader tip on the end, and then it.
No, I know we had different because I know we had the spreaders, and they were pretty thin tipped. You always shove them in hard as you could to get as good a bite as you could and spread. And then the cutters, they weren't super long. They're probably like that, but they would cross. Not to lock them, but they would cross and cut. But the spreaders, they were pretty damn good. They were heavy as hell, but the spreaders are pretty good. I think they were Hearst. Man, it's been so long. Which I got off the truck right before they started doing the battery-powered stuff.
Yeah.
And that stuff is pretty damn amazing, but I've never used them. I've seen some of the videos and whatnot. I was like, that's pretty damn cool. But I don't know. I don't trust batteries that much.
The tools don't work as well. The last 12, 13 years that I was working, I was an officer on an engine company. And that's a whole nother story. After the consolidation of the department and all of that, they eliminated my job, and basically I was back on an ambulance. I was a white-shirted ambulance driver because they had eliminated. And so I had to go back through the whole promotional process on the fire side. But the neat thing was I made a hell of a lot more money in my EMS position as a supervisor.
Yeah.
And when they took the position away, they couldn't take the money away.
Yeah.
And so I was riding in the back of an ambulance making division chief pay. And I promoted up to lieutenant so that I didn't have to ride on an ambulance all the time and I could be on a fire truck. But I never promoted higher because as a lieutenant I could do overtime. And if I promoted higher,
you wouldn't be salaried.
I would be salaried.
Yeah.
But the last 12, 13 years I was on an engine company. And the last couple of years we went to the electrics. Hated them things. They just don't do the trick,
I never got to play with them, but that was always my concern was like batteries. I mean, EMS and batteries doesn't have the best track record. They get used and abused, and usually their lifespan isn't that long. So that was one thing that always concerned me when I saw that come out. I was like, man, there better be some good batteries.
Of course, people don't need to forget hand tools.
No,
hand tools. One of the, again, you teach what people have. And so many of the places that I used to go teach, they had very minimal stuff. I would love to go in and let people work in a junkyard all day and then take them and break them in a group and say, okay, this is your objective. You got power tools, you got hand tools. Let's see who's going to get there first. And a lot of times I would give the girls the hand tools, because, you think, man, hand tools and all of that. Them damn girls that take the hand tools and they just tear cars to pieces.
I remember one of the classes I took, we had to flap a roof with just a hacksaw.
Yeah.
And, that was a basic thing. Like, all right, got hand tools, here's your hacksaw. Here's your bunch of blades.
And it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah. It damn sure will. But I mean, I guess, we hit on a little bit a little bit earlier about, like, aimless staffing and stuff. I'm so far detached now from, like, the schools and stuff. I mean, I know they got classes going on and stuff, but do you see, like, any change in that or, like, the shortage? And I don't know... And I've talked with several people. Like, I don't have an answer. I don't know if anybody does. But, like, the shortage is just kind of crazy to me. Ever since COVID, I feel like COVID just accentuated the problem, brought it to light of a problem that was progressing, and it just sped it on up.
We had a terrible shortage. We had already, because we didn't have enough EMTs to go around, Columbus had refused to make EMT a requirement before you get hired. That was one of the things when we put the departments back together. We had said, okay, you need to make a requirement that you have your EMT before you get hired and you have your paramedic before promotion. And the fire department didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so you ended up with a problem with EMTs. And one of the things that would happen to us is we'd say, okay, all of you have got to be an EMT. So they'd go through the drill field, they'd get to be a firefighter, then you'd have to send them back to EMT school. And a lot of the ones that didn't like being an EMT, they'd get their EMT and then they'd leave and go somewhere else to another service where they weren't going to have to ride on the trucks.
Yeah.
Because basically what it would boil down to is for our guys that were EMTs, on our average engine company, 4 shifts a month, you might be on the bus. Out of a 10-month shift, 4 shifts a month, you're on a bus. And a lot of these people just didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so they would leave and go elsewhere. And so now we're stuck and we're having to bring people back up again. And it got so crazy back during COVID time. We were hiring 18 years old. They cut the drill field for the firefighting side down to about 6 or 8 weeks, just very, very minimal stuff. And we were actually told by the command staff, oh, you can train them in the field. You know, we're just going to give them basics, and then you can train them in the field. You know, if you've got the luxury of being able to do that somewhere, you're in a big multi-company station and all of that. I had a single company station way out in the country, and they would send me these kids out there that were 18 years old, that had been through 8 weeks of firefighting school, that had been through no EMT training whatsoever, and I've got them on a rural truck out there. It was terrible. I was very, very lucky one day because I worked one shift and had a 4-man crew on the truck. My driver was a firefighter EMT that had been on the department for 2 years. He had 2 years total experience, and he's working as a backup driver. And then I had 2 of what we call the red shirts, the 8 weeks that haven't been to EMT training or anything. And I'm there. And I just sweated that whole day thinking, bad shit is going to happen. Bad shit is going to happen. And it didn't happen. So the next shift, I lucked out. The next shift, I had a driver who was a paramedic, I had a firefighter paramedic, and I had a firefighter EMT who was in paramedic school. So I'm feeling good. We had a lady on a golf cart with 2 teenagers driving down the road in a neighborhood, and a guy in a Mercedes has a seizure and hits them at 60 miles an hour.
Oh.
We're on level 0. We've got 5 fire trucks already sitting on scenes waiting for a bus to come back in service. And they're telling me it's probably going to be 15 or 20 minutes before we can get a bus to you. And I get out on the scene, and I've got a kid not breathing, laying in the gutter bleeding. I've got mama who is avulsed all the way over here. I've got daughter over here that's got a fractured pelvis, and her foot's turned around backwards. And I've got the stroke patient who is not breathing, you know. And I was lucky because I had 3 paramedics and an EMT on the truck. You know, I could say, you, boom. And But had it been the shift before, oh, my God. And it happens like that. And we still run into the shortage. That's one of the reasons my son was so glad to get out of training, because they would just be given unreal requirements by downtown. Downtown would say, all right, we got to have these bodies out here. Well, we're not teaching them anything. Well, don't worry about it. We're going to have bodies in the field to be able to cover the trucks. So you just put them out there and they can learn in the field.
Yeah, and that worries me. I feel like there's a lot of short-sightedness with, I don't want to say, I guess departments, but I don't even really want to say it's like just the departments. I feel like it's pressure from wherever, you know, that you got to staff trucks and we got to have these bodies. But and I don't have a good answer, but it's like, you know, I feel like the devotion you had to a department or a service, whatever, like that's been kind of diluted because you just need a body on a truck. And I feel like so many people are viewed as a body on a truck, like, well, they don't really care if I'm here or not. They just need a body. Whereas there's way more investment, I feel like, back in the day, and like, I guess, pride in what you're doing. Not that nobody doesn't like doing what's best for the patient. It's more of like just a pride in the department. Like, it's more transient now. You know what I mean? Like, people are.
The departments are corporate. Yeah. It's funny because my son and I were sitting around consuming malt beverages and having discussions about the state of the world, and we were talking about this. They actually, every year, the city has a seminar, in-service training for officers, and usually the city will bring in people that just give you blah, 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 same old stuff, but they allowed them to pick. And the people that they picked this year were talking about trends. And they said that that's exactly what is happening out there. Mm-hmm. You got to be a firefighter. Nobody ever wanted to be a firefighter and make money. That's not why you went to work. You went to work because of the camaraderie, the excitement, the self-satisfaction, all of these other things that you got out of the job. And the fire department was a family. You had generational folks in the fire department, and that's why people were there. And, you know, to some extent on the EMS side, it was the same way. That's why people are there. But now you've got corporate. The people that are the officers, instead of being a fireman representing the fire department or the EMS to the administration, they're administrators who are overseeing fire EMS. Mm-hmm. And so why do people want to work there anymore?
Yeah.
They're on a zero fault thing right now back in Columbus. He was telling me about this because they have had vehicle wrecks now. You get a call, and that truck's got to be out the door in 1 minute. But you can't put on any gear in the truck. You've either got to get every bit of your gear on before you go out the door, or you've got to wait till you get to the scene to put your gear on. They've got cameras in the truck running 24/7, monitoring what you're doing so they can see if you're doing that. They now have made the cab a sterile environment. Even when you're not on an emergency call, if you're coming back from the hospital or you're going to the store, you're not allowed to talk to each other in the cab because you might distract somebody. Even the guy in the back seat, if he's talking, he might not be watching that side and might not see the car that's coming from that direction. It's stupid. And the corporate things, my son has been on the department for almost 24 years, and he got written up for the first time in his career a couple of weeks ago. The reason that he got written up is they have memos that come out from downtown. They've got, the thing comes out on the computer, and they send out memo after memo after memo. And to make sure that the memos get read, every firefighter, every EMT is supposed to go on the computer every day and read the memos and mark that they have read the memos. And so he's got a guy that's on vacation. Even when you're on vacation, you're supposed to check a computer and read these things. You're held accountable. And the officer is held accountable to make sure that the person does this. So there was a memo that came out that said that the training chief was going to be out of the office for 3 days, and so was going to be taking call for him. That was the memo. This kid's on vacation. He's on a cruise. He doesn't have access to be able to look at and read all of this stuff, so he doesn't complete the memo. So next thing you know, my son, who has never been written up in his life, his battalion chief calls him in and is like, "This is bullshit, but I'm told that I have to write you up because your man didn't complete that, and you didn't make sure that he completed that." And then you wonder sometimes why we have a shortage. It's not fun anymore. Okay? No. It's not fun. It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, and that kills me. Like, I guess this corporatization, like, the accountants running it, it's like you don't understand what's going on and what you're doing. Like, it looks good on the books. Oh, this bottom line, or, I got this covered. Our butts are covered. But, and like you said, you wonder why you're short. You don't see what you're doing. Or maybe you do and you don't care. But that kills me. And I know, some people say, "Oh, it's just we need more pay and more pay." And like you said, it's not the pay that's going to solve everything. And I also tell people, it's like, what they're going to expect when they say they give you a pay more. Say they give you a 15% raise. What do you think they're going to expect? They're going to want more out of you. And not saying that we can't do more, but they're going to want more out of you. That's probably BS, to be honest. Oh, well, now that we're paying you this, we also want you to do this since we're paying you more. It's like, what? So I'm like, you got to be careful what you wish for. But I don't think, nobody gets into this job because, I'm going to make a ton of money in my career. No.
Across the river from us in Phoenix City, Alabama, they've got a unionized fire department over there. And so there is a constant battle between the fire administration, the city government, and the union. And they got so much chicken stuff that goes on over there. We used to go stand by over there for them. They get a major fire. They're a small department. And when I worked on the downtown truck, we would go stand by. So we go over there on a Saturday morning to stand by for a fire. It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. We're in our T-shirts. We come into the station. We turn the TV on, put the coffee pot on, prop our feet up. And they've got a fireman that's been left there at the station with a radio, and he's like, "You can't do that. You can't do that. You have to have your uniform on. If you're not in bed, you have to have your button-down shirt on, and it has to be tucked in. And you can't turn on the TV before 5 o'clock, and you can't make coffee after 9 o'clock in the morning. And you need to either be studying or cleaning." And we're like, "You want us to go home?" And it's that corporate thing. That's not what we're in it for. And if you're looking at results, what's going to give you better results? Following a corporate strategy and all of that, or having a family environment where people have got pride in what they do. You know, I used to, a lot of times with some of the supervisors that I had, and when I became a supervisor, I tried to follow the same model. These guys, I didn't do what they wanted because I was afraid they were going to discipline me. I did what they wanted because I didn't want to disappoint them.
Yeah.
I respected them. They were the boss. They took care of me. And in turn, when I did my job, I worked because I didn't want to disappoint them.
Yeah.
And I tried to do the same thing with the people that worked for me. When I was a shift supervisor, I was like, I'm here for you. Okay, you're a professional. You know what you're doing. You don't need me to stand here and tell you how to do your job. My job is to make it easier for you to do your job. What can I do to help you? But with this corporate mentality nowadays, you've got these bean counters that have got another bean counter above them, that has got another bean counter above them, and they're all looking down on each other. It's like, you ever watch the show The Office?
Yeah, I watched some of it.
It's like The Office, you know, and that's some of the culture. And I see that as one of the really big problems that we've got nowadays in the fire EMS business, because that's why we've got a shortage. Yeah, people don't want to work here anymore. It's different.
They don't want to. It doesn't seem, you know, this is very general when I say this, but it doesn't seem like you want to promote the leaders who have a good, like, moral compass or want to do the right thing. You want kind of the yes men who are going to do what you want to do.
Exactly.
And that's, you know, who wants to work for that?
You don't want to work for
that. Nobody wants to work for the yes man who doesn't necessarily seem to have a spine, or who's not going to have your back, you know, because you were doing the right thing or whatever. Oh, well, that was against this one policy, so, you know, I'm going to write you up. But you don't see the bigger picture of what we accomplished. Well, you know, you violated this policy, you know, because you had your boots off at 4:50 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
and I mean, that goes back.
And that's such an aggravating. Nobody wants to come to work and feel like they have to look over their shoulder and cover their butts all the time.
Goes back to the protocol thing that you're talking about. Protocol. You've got departments, and we're doing it now. I say we. I'm not there anymore, so I hear it secondhand. But on protocols, you've got QA people that are down there that used to be good field medics. The head guy in our department is one of my paramedics that I taught 25 years ago, and he used to be one of my officers when he was in the field and we were separate. But he's now the QA guy. He's the devil from hell, because they're going over stuff and, okay, you didn't do this, and protocol clearly says that you will do this. Okay, but I had X, Y, and Z. Doesn't matter. Protocol says you will do this. Yeah. And they write people up for that. And, you know, what do you do?
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, I've thought so long and hard, like, how does this change? And I kind of feel like it's got to come to a point where, like, you got to, and maybe it comes to a point where bean counters or corporate or whatever realize, hey, whatever we're doing right now is not working. But I don't, you know, on their end, I don't know if it's not working. I mean, eventually, I feel like they got to see, like, the short-staffedness and what you're trying to accomplish isn't working. And I hope some places are changing that. I know some are, but you still see it a lot. Like you're talking about Columbus, whatever over there. It's just, it's so disheartening, you know? And it's like you want people to come into this job, but they come into it and see that, and you don't see any good leaders. You know, and the good leaders that have been, like yourself, that have been doing it for 40 years, that's getting few and far between. You know, I'm sure the age of people staying in EMS is just getting shorter. You know, I haven't seen any recent surveys, but you know, when I came in, I think they said 7 or 8 years. Last I heard was like 5, and I got to feel like it ain't got longer.
No, and on the EMS side, you've also got to give a little bit of leeway. And now, this is going to be funny coming from me. I fought real hard for us to get out of the fire department back in '86 and be third service EMS, because I think functionally a lot of times third service EMS is going to operate better. But being in a fire department has got one great and tremendous advantage. You're working in a small to medium size EMS service, and what does your career ladder look like? You're a paramedic and you're on the truck, and 10 years from now you're probably going to be a paramedic on the truck. And as much as you love the job, eventually it's going to get to the point that it burns you out. One of the reasons that I was able to work 43 years with Columbus is because I substantially changed what I did. Every 6, 7, 8 years I did a totally different job. And if you've got EMS within a fire department, you've got that leeway where you're not stuck riding in the back of a bus for 40 years. You've got something else that you can move over to. And it's like in my case, after I had been away from it for a while, I enjoyed going back to it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed getting back on the truck. I used to, because we had such a shortage of medics, officers are not supposed to ride on the buses anymore, but because we had such a shortage of medics, they wanted us to ride. I'd ride 2 or 3 shifts a month, and I'd have fun. It was great.
Yeah.
Because I could get back on the truck and get to be a medic and all of that, and it was neat. But I knew that I wasn't going to be there next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. I knew I'm going to ride this shift, and then I'm going to go back on the fire truck for 4 more shifts,
Yeah.
And you got to do something like that. And again, that's one of the little advantages of having EMS and fire together is you've got a little bit of diversity there.
Yeah. That's definitely the ability the ability for any upward mobility, like at fire department, is a great thing. I felt like the leadership stuff there for a while was way worse. And I know it's bad some places, but I see some younger people coming into positions that, I've known that are very proactive, want to make stuff better. And I hope that tide is starting to change. I truly do, because I feel like if it doesn't, EMS, public safety, fire isn't going to get any better until you start getting the right people in place. Because, any service department team, whatever, and I've said this before, it's going to take on the attitude of its manager. And if the attitude of the superiors is to cover your butt and we're watching you and all this stuff,
go all the way down to the field.
Yeah, you're not going to have good people below you, especially good people that are going to trust you. Like, so you don't trust me to do what I need to, but you trust me so little. You have a camera in the station to make sure I have my boots on. But you want me to trust you on the other stuff, and this is a family environment. You know what I mean? Like, these two things aren't jiving. You know what I mean? And it's just crazy to me.
No, they're monitoring in the station. They say they are not monitoring in the station, but they're monitoring in the station. In the day room of every station, they've got the city TV up here that has got in-service stuff coming on it and all. It's got a microphone in it. They've got people in QA now that are monitoring what's going on in the fire station to make sure that you don't say something off the wall. What it's going to take to change, and it's very, very sad, but it's going to take the system breaking down.
Yeah, that's what worries me.
I mean, it's happened before, and it's going to take the system breaking down. Yeah, it's terrible, but 9/11 for 15 years was one of the best things that happened to public safety.
Yeah.
You hate to think about it, but it brought all kind of money in there. There was an attitude of, I want to do my part.
Yeah.
I want to do something. I can be an American by being a paramedic or a firefighter or something like that. And, it brought the whole pride and all back into it. And it's sad, but it's going to take something like that. It's going to take the system totally breaking down before the system fixes itself.
And I feel like COVID did like the reverse of that. Everybody got so burnt out from all the COVID medical stuff that they're like, screw this. I'm going to get out of this. This is too much. I'm, overburdened, overtasked, which made the system even more everybody else way more overburdened and overtasked. And I know everybody's short now, and like goes back to it. Now, it goes all the way down the chain or up the chain. So now flight's getting called more for everything. And people are like, oh, why is this getting flown? Because they don't have anybody. They don't have anybody, and there's no resources at this hospital, and they have to go somewhere, and there's no truck to take them. What you going to do? And it's like it's just the interconnected. How everything's so interconnected, it transfers down the chain. And we see it in flight, like from personnel that gets hired. Not that there's like low quality personnel, but if the pool on the ground is smaller, the pool in the air is going to be smaller.
Yeah, it is. And I mean,
the officer pool on the ground, fire department, everything's getting smaller because the good people that you had there are getting out, and you don't seem to be pulling any good people. And it's just like such a domino effect. It's like where can you stop these dominoes at to change this tide?
We used to have waiting lists.
Yeah.
It was hard to get on and to get into public safety.
It was hard for me to get on at fire department.
Back when we were Columbus CMS, we didn't hire full-time. We had, in addition to our full-time staff, we had about 25 part-timers, and we used them to do peak load staffing, vacation, all kind of stuff like that. And the career path at that time was you finished the MT school, you went to work for a private service to get you a little bit of time so that you could get a slot with the city working as a part-timer, and you could work your way up to full time. And it benefited us because we had all of these people that, you're not paying all the benefits for full time personnel. You can use them when you need them. Plus, you're doing your professional development. A lot of times with these peak loaders that we got, they'd be paramedic by the time the full time position opened up. They would already be ready to move in. But.
Yeah, and it was, when I started.
Now there's not a waiting list. Now you're having to beat the bushes to find.
I know, and that just disheartens me because I kind of feel like they're not going to really have any kind of desire to be invested in that service. And I just started off as a part timer too, just to get hired full time. But when you're part time, you were hoping you were going to get called in because that's the only way you get to full time status was by pulling full time hours. And it wasn't when you got called. It wasn't. Well, who am I going to be working with? Where am I going to be at? Nah, I don't want to go work over there. It was like, if you got called, you better go work it. It didn't matter. That wasn't even like a question or an option. And I heard that and I was like, well, it doesn't matter. Just go. I don't want to go work there. Huh? That this is the attitude you have? No, that wasn't even consideration. Didn't even enter the realm.
Just as a sideline, kind of on that a little bit, back during COVID and right after COVID with the staffing shortages, we had to maintain coverage, which meant that you had to pay overtime to bring people in. Mm-hmm. Myself and probably about 15 or 20 other people were making six figures a year because of the overtime. Yeah. And then people would whine, and it's unfair. It's unfair. They're getting all the overtime. You know why we were getting all the overtime? I'm a battalion chief. I've got a truck that needs covered. I don't have time to go down the list and see who is available, who doesn't have hours. I'm going to call somebody who I know is going to come into work. Mm-hmm. They don't let them do that anymore because it was unfair. Now, when they're trying to fill a slot on the truck, the chiefs can't just call the person that they know is going to come in. They have to go down the list, and the person who is going to come in is probably going to be at the bottom of the list because they've got the most shifts. They've got to start off with the people that have no shifts. They got no shifts because they don't want to come in and work. Mm. And what you were talking about, people would ask me, how do you get so much overtime? I said, because my name is Yes.
Yeah.
The chief calls up and says, Blood, what are you doing? Yes. You don't even know what I want. Yes.
Yeah.
That's the way that you get to work. People don't do that.
No, and it's from generational and cultural differences. It's just it's so hard to put, which I guess you can't put a single finger on something, but it's just I don't want it to fail, I guess, to get to rock bottom, and I sincerely hope some stuff's changing. I've seen some good stuff, heard some good stuff, but there's still so much cruddy stuff you see out there. You're trying to get into it. You try to keep a good attitude, but I know we get, like you said, air gets called a lot these times, especially in Georgia in this area. And I know many people get burnt out in the air from flying so much on stuff that might be borderline stuff you need to call a helicopter for. Let's be generous, but it's just what do you do? There's no good answer. And I truly feel like you want to go back to the basics of management. Everybody's going to take on the attitude of leaders, and I think something of that's got to change. And I feel like COVID put such a stress on that, brought it to light, made it all worse that, oh man, something's got to change with that. You
got to work on the candidate pool out there too, because and it's not just us; it's anything.
Yeah.
Kids nowadays don't want to work. They don't have the concept that we grow up in of having a job and staying with a job and building and moving on. They want to work and then they want to go. And, I don't feel like working today. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of an attitude that is coming up in the kids nowadays.
I think I felt such a burden that if I didn't work, I was putting an undue pressure on somebody else. Yeah. Somebody else going to have to carry my load because I'm not doing what I need to be doing. If there wasn't coverage or something, you know what I mean? And I don't think that's, I need my me time. I want to do this. And I get that to some degree. You don't need to burn yourself out. But at some point, you are putting a big load on other people who are going to do that.
It's a generational thing. My wife is 17 years younger than me. I mean, we've been married for 26 years, but she's a generation younger than me.
Yeah.
She used to get so pissed off because I would work, and she would be like, you don't owe it to them. Why are you going in? Well, because they need me. Well, that's not an excuse, That's taking away time because they need me. Okay, I'm needed. They have a position that they need filled, and if I don't go in and work, that position is not going to get filled, and somebody might have a bad outcome.
Yeah.
But they don't think that way nowadays. They don't think that at all.
No, they don't, and it's I hope it's a thing that can get turned around and changed. Some of the people, I guess part of why I'm doing this is to bring to light some of those attitudes, like yourself and some of the older timers who had that in spades. Your generation before me, when you started, I was born, and
it's something that we've talked about recently. I'm the third generation EMS. The first generation was before EMS. The rescue squads and all of those people that got trained and started doing things and were doing first aid. Then the government came out with the national curriculums, the EMT curriculum in 66 and the paramedic in 70. And that was the second generation, and that was Johnny and Roy. Okay, that's the Johnny and Roy generation. I was lucky because when I first came on board, I was working with the dinosaurs and the Johnny and Roys. Those were my role models that I came up with. Yeah. My generation is the third generation. We were the ones that started taking more and expanded stuff. There's how many generations since then?
Yeah, I don't know.
How people are is just totally different. It really is.
It's just got so distant. And I mean, even when I started, it wasn't like when I started as when I was 05, 22 when I started. It wasn't like I had this in spades when I started or anything. It was, a lot of this was ingrained to me by the people, the old timers that had been there for a while when I started fire department. And I saw that, and I was vested. Even to my early EMS days, the older paramedics that worked when I started, they very much cared for their patients and wanted to do the right thing, and they were for the job. And they all paramedics will bitch. It's just one of the things. but it was just a completely different attitude. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to show up to work. I'm going to do my job best I can. I'm going to bitch about some stupid stuff, but when it comes nut cutting time, so to speak, this is what I'm going to do. This is what needs to be done. And if it was the right thing to do for the patient, it's the right thing we're going to do, and I'm going to fight you on it. And if somebody came at him about what they did, why? I was doing the right thing for the patient. And that was, always the sole focus, where now it seems to be, well, I don't know if it's something I really want to do, like, or if I want to come to work today, or, I don't know. It's just, it's a completely different, attitude. It's hard not to get sucked into, true, especially still working. You get sucked into it real easy.
I miss it so much, and I talk all the time about how much I miss it. I see the truck going down the road. I see stuff out on calls. But then after the session that I had with my son the other day, and he was telling me about all of the stuff that's going on now, I'm like, do I really miss it? Because I can remember it was going that ways before I retired, and the stupidity that's out there, I think I probably got out at a good time. I don't know that I could have stayed longer, because if I had stayed longer, I would have told them to go to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a good time for me to go, because this is wrong. What you're doing is wrong.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing where you're like, at least through myself, I weigh myself like, am I just reminiscing about too much of the old days and now there's change going on and I don't like the change? Or is this just not the change that needs to happen? And I very much lean towards the latter a lot, because I try to at least reassess on stuff like, well, what's the reason I'm upset about this? Is it because I don't want to do it, or it's not the good thing to do for the patient or the department? And all the time, it seems like it leans toward the latter. I mean, there's always stuff that you're personally not going to like. But, whatever it be, I always try to say, well, is this something I want, or is this the right thing, or is this what's good for the patient? And
it's sad, because when I grew up in the business, and when you grew up in the business, you had so many people that didn't want to change, and their line was, well, that's because we've always done it.
Yeah.
Okay? And so that was one extreme, but we've gone to a different extreme now,
Mm-hmm. This needs to change for my betterment and ease, I don't know. Either way, I don't think, like I said many times, I don't think anybody's got a good answer, but I think everybody sees the problem. But I don't think – I haven't seen any good long-term solutions for it. Not like anybody's got to be presenting that to me. It's not like I'm supposed to get an email every week of, this is the long-term solutions we got. I just see short-term crappy solutions that I'm sure I'm not the only one that sees that and like, this is a terrible idea.
If nothing else, one of the things by doing stuff, if people are looking at this, is that people that watch this say, wait a minute, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that things are not right and things could be better, but I'm not getting any support or anything like that. Hopefully by listening to folks like us, they can say, maybe I do need to care. Maybe I do need to work a little bit harder. You know?
And I think just like your son, using your son as an example, just having that gumption, determination, motivation to do your own thing and do what's right. Maybe that's the best solution right now. Try not to be too swayed and keep a strong moral compass of what needs to be done.
I'm going to do my job.
Yeah.
And, whether they like it or not, and hopefully I can be a good example to you, but I'm going to do my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep your head out of the weeds and just try to do you. I say do you, but not when I say that, I don't want it to sound like don't be a participant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think at some point you just have to try to keep a strong moral compass and try not to get bogged down in the weeds too much. Because damn, if it ain't hard to do, or if it's very easy to do, and fire and EMS to get bogged down in the weeds and the crap.
And it's easy to get discouraged and just say, screw it. Okay, I'm
very
tired of fighting the system. What is the least that I can get by with doing? I'm going to keep my head low. I'm going to follow protocol. What is the least that I can do? And that's what I'm going to do. And it's not what we want.
No, it ain't. And I myself have been there many times, and they're like, that's not bringing me happiness. That's not why I did this, to just do the lowest common denominator, do the bare minimum, and just get by and earn a check. That's not bringing you any kind of job satisfaction. I can tell you that, from personal experience. But
where do we stand time-wise?
I don't know. We're just past 3 hours. So I know before too long I got to go get my daughter. But time flies when you do this, when you talk. I'm telling you.
I've got to, my wife turns 50 tomorrow, and she's having her 50th birthday party.
Oh, wow.
And so I have been stringing lights and doing stuff. So I've got to go back home and do stuff. We're going to have the flowery thing in the backyard and all of that. And
you going to let some doves loose?
If she could do it, she would do it. I'm telling you, we've got flowers hanging. She's got her girlfriends involved, and I just told her, "Tell me what you want me to do." Yesterday, I was hanging Christmas lights up in trees, and
you need a couple of those glitter cannons.
Don't give her any please. When I turned 50, my pa-in-law had a place out in the country, and he took a bulldozer and pushed a bonfire together, and my wife contacted all of my friends and said, bring a cooler, bring some food, bring your four-wheeler, and we're going to hang out. Different expectations and different. That made me happy.
Yeah.
This makes her happy.
Yeah.
Okay. Happy wife, happy life.
Absolutely.
So that's what I've got to do. I got to leave here and go home and string lights and be a good participant.
Well, safe travels on the way back home.
All right.
Watch out for crazy drivers.
All right. We enjoyed it. To all you people out there in the EMS world, hang in there. Okay?
Yeah.
It's a good life, and you can do it.
Yeah. I know we bitch about the job, but we also tell a lot of good stories about the job, whether it be fire, EMS, whatever.
Yeah, you need to have some sessions of just stories.
Oh, look, I'll tell you about that. We have one. I got something about that coming up. I'll tell you once I stop recording. I'll tell you about
it. Since we're doing just stories, I'm going to tell one more story.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can put on here. When I was working in Talbot County, had a truck pulled up in front of the station. You're out in the middle of nowhere. You're 40 miles from the nearest hospital, and this truck driver has got kidney stones. And he comes in the door, and he has just got big beads of sweat pouring off of him. He is hurting so bad. And he's like, I was trying to drive to the hospital, but I can't drive anymore. And I'm like, dude, hey, we will take care of you fine. We'll get your truck locked up, get in the back of my truck. I'm going to get an IV started on you. I'm going to give you some good pain medications and make you feel better. Well, at that particular time, we didn't have standing orders for pain medication. You had to call and say, Mother, may I? And so I call Upson, and I give him full report. I say, here's the vitals, here's what's going on. He's in tremendous pain. I'd like to be able to give him 4 milligrams of morphine, repeat if needed. Stand by. We must ask the doc. The doctor says no. I said, be advised, we're 25 minutes out, and we're driving on back roads. Mm-hmm. This guy is really, really hurting. Would you please put the doctor on the radio?
this is Dr. So-and-so. I don't believe in treating in the field. I would like for the patient to be seen before I get up.
Okay, whatever. And so I'm telling this guy, and I mean, this guy's leaving finger marks in my legs. He's holding on so tight. So we get him into the ER, and he is in pain, and the doc comes over to talk to him, and he looks at me, the patient looks at me and says, is this the doc that wouldn't give the pain medication? That's him. He reaches over, grabs a handful, and picks the guy up. And the doc's like, ah! And he's like, I need pain medication now. Give this man some morphine. He literally picked him up by the...
Damn.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, the tails are out there. We need tails.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're going to do something, which I might, what's this? The 28th? We're recording the 28th. I might probably release this about right there around EMS week, just depending how fast I can get them done. But I got something I'm going to release EMS week. We got some coming up later this week I'm going to do. But I'll tell you about it.
Tell me about it.
More specifically as soon as we get off the camera here. Right. I don't spoil it too much.
That was good.
Yeah. Look.
Every minute of it.
Me too. Look, you're the first guest I've had that I don't know. Or, I knew nothing about you. And so I was happy with that. It's like, hey, it's somebody new I don't know anything about. So
we're out there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's more of them.
All right.
See y'all.